everyone. Welcome back to the Let's Talk Movies podcast with me, John, and David, aka Shamrock Balls. And we are opening up season 3 of the Let's Talk Movies podcast with my co-host here. Favorite film of all time, which he has never shied away from telling anyone about that. And that means that today we're going to be talking about 1975's Jaws. And David, why don't you tell the good people about it? Because you're going to be leading this podcast for sure today.
Yeah, first of all, John, what's this movie about?
I believe it's about a shark.
Oh, what?
That's creative, and all the Jaws fans will know that one.
Yeah, I thought it was too obvious, but I was like, I'll have to go with this one. I can't think of any other one at the minute. But yeah, I think I've talked an awful lot about Jaws on this podcast. And our last episode, which was our top 10 favorite Spielberg movies, I touched on about a bit or a lot of why Jaws is my favorite film. And we actually, when we started this podcast, John, it was predominantly going to be a James Bond podcast. And then we decided to, well, I'd asked you, because it was Jaws 2's 45th anniversary, can we maybe do Jaws 2 for a change? And then that kind of started this whole movie podcast rather than just doing James Bond. But we covered an awful lot on that about the making of Jaws. So if anybody wants to go back and listen to that, I think it's an excellent podcast for one of our first, which we mainly just discuss, the seeds of Jaws and Steven Spielberg and how it came about and some of the differences between Jaws and Jaws 2. So I don't think we need to go over old ground where that's concerned.
Yeah, that one was more like when we went through the background, and not for nothing. I'm sure most people who are watching this know about the background of Jaws because the making of Jaws is pretty famous. It's like gone through. There's two famous documentaries. The making of that came out in 1995, and then the one that you actually just saw. It was a Broadway play that expanded around the world. The shark is still working. That's a very famous documentary in and of itself. So there's two very famous documentaries about the making of this film, and we also just did a Steven Spielberg show, and the roots of Steven Spielberg are also kind of built in the Jaws as well.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. And, this was Spielberg just showing off really what he could do. He really needed a hit. And he literally put blood, sweat, and tears into getting this movie made. A lot of it because a lot of forces were working against him with, sharks breaking down and the townsfolk not cooperating and his actors not getting on and dealing with the ocean and the weather and stuff like that. So Spielberg really had to pull out all the stops to get this movie made. And I think if it had been any other director at that time, this film would have been a complete disaster. But as you say, I'm only just back there not too long ago. Last week, I went to watch The Shark is Broken, which was an absolutely fabulous play. It's basically about the making of Jaws, and it's set on board the Orca, and it stars the characters of Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss, and some of the conflict they had while making the movie. And the main draw for me, apart from being a play about Jaws, the main draw for me was that Ian Shaw, Robert Shaw's son, was playing Robert Shaw in the play. But I have to say that all three actors were absolutely phenomenal. It was 90 minutes long. There was no intermission. It's all just sat aboard the Orca, which was like a 1-1 scale of the Orca on the stage. And it was a great experience. I'm really glad I seen it. I was chuffed. I just couldn't take my eyes off it for the full 90 minutes. It flew by, and I savored every moment of it.
That's awesome. So, was it kind of like a mixture of scenes from the movie and then them actually talking about the making of the film?
No, so basically what it is, John, is that the Orca is on the stage, and it's kind of like from what I'm led to believe, it is a 1-1 prop replica, but it's kind of sliced in half. So you could see the stern, and then you could see inside the cabin, and then you had the bow of the boat, and it starts with and then the behind him it's projected the ocean. It's under the back of the stage, and it starts with the Jaws theme, and you see the fin, and then all of a sudden it just breaks down. And then the next thing is Roy Scheider comes walking across and gets into the cabin, sits down with a cigarette and starts reading the newspaper. And then Richard Dreyfuss comes along, and they just start talking about, the shark breaking down and just basically the difficulties of making the movie. So I say I don't want to spoil it for anybody that wants to go and watch it. That was the UK and Ireland tour, so it just finished on, a couple of days ago. I know that there's a tour going on in the States at the minute with different actors. So I don't know where they're going to go with this, because I did hear that was Ian Shaw's last performance on Saturday night of playing his father. So I don't know whether or not they're going to continue this with different actors. They're maybe going to do another tour next year. But generally, as a Jaws fan, some of the stuff in the play was based on some of the stories which I have read in books, seen in documentaries about the making of Jaws. It focuses on the Indianapolis speech as well, how that get written, and then there was other wee Easter eggs and tidbits through in there that, as a Jaws super fan, that you could pick up on when you're watching it. And then there was other stories as well, which I kind of think to myself, I never heard, and I think, wonder where that came from. So, as I say, it was very good. You'll enjoy it if you're a Jaws fan. You'll enjoy it if you're a movie fan. But yeah, it was very good. So it's kind of like spaced out over like the filming behind the scenes, and it's kind of spaced out over a few days. Like, if the lights will down and then they will come back up again, it'll be like a new day.
Okay, that's awesome. That's very, very interesting. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was definitely an experience.
I'm glad that you had a good time, and it does sound like something that was like tailor-made for you. Now, I don't remember if we went over this in the original Jaws and Jaws 2 show, but I know we touched on it on the last show we did. But when did you first discover Jaws? Like, I thought it was fascinating that you discovered it almost in a way of not knowing its legacy.
Yeah, that's right. I listened to our first podcast earlier before it came on. Because I wanted to refresh my memory, so we didn't go over too much of the same ground. But I first discovered Jaws when I was 6 years of age, believe it or not, which was, as I said in our Spielberg episode, 37 years ago. So I'm
sorry.
I know. When I say it, it seems so long. So I'm trying to think. It was like 1987, maybe, and around that time. I can't remember exactly remember when, but I think it was a Sunday. I remember my dad was in the kitchen. I think he was making Sunday dinner, and my brother, I have an older brother who's 9 years older than me, and he was asking my dad, could he talk? They were talking about Jaws being on the television. I actually remember this, and I didn't know what it was about. I actually asked, what is that? And my brother told me it was about a girl who is having a bath and gets ate by the plug hole. As me being a 6-year-old, I went, how does a plug hole eat her? The plug hole's only that size. And he says, we know it expands and it swallows her whole. So that was fascinating to me. I wanted to see this. So I begged my dad, could I stay up and watch it, or could I watch it? And he let me. And ever since then, it's just became a fascination and an obsession for me, to the point where I know this movie inside out. So that was the first time I seen it.
That is awesome. I always want to know where the origins of your fandom began, to the point now you've probably seen the movie over 100 times.
Oh, more than 100, John.
More than
100. I don't know how many times I've stopped counting, but it does get to the stage where, like, I think I'd mentioned to you before, you even being a big fan of the Terminator. I'm sure you've seen the Terminator many times, where less is more, just like the movie. Less is more, and that's why, like, as a movie fan, and we try and tailor our podcast to be seasonal. What movies maybe more for us. It's kind of like, what movies do we like to watch in the summer, and what movies do we think are good for the autumn or the winter? And like, Jaws is definitely one of those summer movies. So I always try and kind of like not watch Jaws until the summertime, and even then I only maybe watch it once, maybe twice at most now in the summer, because I am a fan of the franchise. I love Jaws 2, I love Jaws 3, and I love Jaws the Revenge. And Jaws the Revenge, if anybody's listened to the pod, has become one of my unofficial Christmas movies. I look forward to watching it in between Christmas and New Year and have a few Bahamas plans. And so the summertime is for like Jaws 2 and Jaws 3, because Jaws 3 to me is not canon, right? But
no.
Funny enough, I couldn't believe it. I was sitting here on Sunday, and I seen on Facebook somebody had put on that one of the television stations here, like ITV1, was showing Jaws 2 at 11:15 on a Sunday night, and I was like, my God, that's like prime time on proper TV on a Sunday night. I can't believe they're showing Jaws 2. And I was sitting, I couldn't sleep, so I flicked it on and I sat watching Jaws 2 to like 1:45 in the morning. So I kind of figured it out. I went, you know what? June is like Jaws. July should be Jaws 2 and August should be Jaws 3 month. That's the way I'm going to do it.
That makes sense. And that way you get them all in every single year.
Yeah, and it's at least once. It's my favorite franchise. It's no different than probably someone who's a big Star Wars fan who maybe watches the Star Wars movies once a year, or who's a big, for example, Halloween fan, always has to watch Halloween every October. Or watch a load of there's certain horror movies people watch in October. It's the same for me. Jaws is my favorite movie. I have my Jaws paraphernalia around me. I have to have it. I have the soundtrack. I'll listen to the soundtrack now and again and stuff like that. But I only try and watch it once a year.
Yeah, I've kind of gotten to that point, and I have a theory on this because I used to have movies that I would watch. Like I had almost like a list. It was just mentally where I watched the movie once a year, and then it almost got to the point where okay, I watch it every other year. Or now some movies get spread out to every 3 years. I think it's because as we get older, I'm sure everyone's noticed this. Those days seem a little bit shorter, and those years go by a lot quicker. So it feels like what used to feel like that year took a long time to get around to that rewatch. You feel like, man, I just rewatched this.
Exactly, and I feel as if, and it's true. The older you get, the more busy you get, the more responsibility you have. You have family, you have house, you have animals. As I was saying to you earlier, you've got animals, and you've work as well, and you just I think you just don't have as much time as you used to have. And sometimes it's a case of, do I watch this again or do I watch something new? And sometimes you just want something new, especially the older you get, especially if you've seen a film a lot of times. And it's like Christmas Vacation that's my favorite Christmas movie. And that is a movie which I kind of think to myself, I have to watch it every Christmas, but I don't. Some Christmases come around so quick that maybe you watch a couple of different Christmas films instead, and you realize you just haven't had that time to watch it, and Christmas is over, and you can't watch it once Christmas is over. It just doesn't feel right.
No, there's only a certain Christmas movies that kind of seep in there a little bit. Sometimes I don't do it anymore, but Die Hard used to kind of overlap, and Lethal Weapon actually does. I'll watch Lethal Weapon whenever still.
Yeah, Lethal Weapon is definitely one of my go-to Christmas movies as well. But again, John, it's one of those things. It's like I have a set amount of Christmas movies, and it's like sometimes you are so busy, especially around Christmas time. I mightn't get them all in, so I might start to watch a few and not get the couple of ones. So by the time the next year rolls around, you kind of go, you know what? I haven't watched this in a couple of years. I'll fire this one on this time.
I know that I've been watching a movie too many seasons in a row. It's a Wonderful Life is my favorite Christmas movie, and it used to be an every year watch. And then it got to the point where at the end, if I don't cry at the end of it, I'm like, no, the movie's not working as well as it used to. I'm going to take next year off.
Yeah, and that's how I feel about, say, Jaws, as in but look, because I've watched it so many times, if I kind of put it off for a while, I kind of get a wee bit more kind of excited for seeing it again. The attack scenes hit harder to me. The music hits harder for me. You know what I mean? If I kind of leave it a while and stuff like that. So I think it's a good exercise for any movie that you're quite fond of, to maybe hold off on it, and then you'll enjoy it even more. And you remember why you love the movie in the first place.
Yeah, it tastes a little bit sweeter the longer you wait.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I don't know if you want to tell the audience about your experience with Jaws or how you feel about it before we dive into the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of famously at this point, that I'm not as big a Jaws fan as you, almost to the point where I almost got defensive immediately just because it's not that I don't like Jaws. I think that's always kind of what it is. It's just that Jaws is considered the Star Wars franchise, Halloween, as those cornerstone movies that everybody loves and has to be put on a pedestal. And Jaws just never, when I would watch it, I'd really enjoy it, but I never walked away with that emotional impact of the movie. And I think I just also never was. I think a lot of it comes down to my fascination with sharks. I don't really have much. There's no interest for me in them. Not a beach guy. I don't really enjoy the beach at all. So I'm never gonna really go out to the ocean to where Jaws can possibly even get me. So I think maybe that kind of works against it. But I've always liked the movie, and as I've gotten older, I appreciate the movie more, especially the filmmaking of it all. But the way I first came to this movie was also, it's funny, is the other guy who Dennis, who I host, my cousin, he showed me Jaws for the first time because he was and he's younger than me. He just was a fan from day one because he has a fascination with sharks himself. So he loved Jaws from the very beginning. And, he couldn't stop talking about it. And I was like, it's good. It's good. And then I had to keep watching it.
Which really funny when I was listening to our original podcast on Jaws and Jaws 2, you said to me at the start that Jaws wouldn't be in your top 10 Spielberg movies. And
Things change.
I was astonished by that, but things have changed. We're turning the screw, John. So we are.
Well, I noticed, like, because this is the most research I've ever done for one of our shows was for this, and I watched a lot of documentaries. And one thing I've always like, a movie can get better for me the more I like learn about the movie and like learning about how a movie's made. That's why I always love being a physical media collector, because one thing is when they start to include those documentaries. And Jaws was a big deal because the first time they ever included that documentary was on a laser disc. So physical media, people were buying laserdisc players to watch that documentary.
That's
And
right.
when DVDs came around, that was a big selling point, was the documentaries. And that can do a lot as far as like increasing the value of the film for me. And think that since we've been doing the show, like I start to focus on movies in a different way. And when I watch Jaws now, it's like I might not love certain aspects of it, but there's other aspects that I appreciate so much more now than I ever did.
Yeah, I remember like that documentary. I had that laser disc in my hands back in the mid-90s because I just seen it's like an LP and I just had to have it, and I lifted it and I bought it, and I came away from the shop. I was still in the shop and I looked at it and was like, what's a laser disc player? I just bought it, and I kind of panicked because it was £20 back then, and that was a lot. I think that's all the money I had on me. I was only a mid-teenager or something. I don't even know how I got the money. And I went and then I panicked. I went, well, I can't play it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to bring this back. And I walked straight back to the girl at serving and says, listen, I've bought this. It's £20. I don't have a player. I thought I could play it. And then she just kind of went, okay, and give me a refund. And I look back at it now and I wish I had kept it.
Yeah, that would have been cool to have kept all these years later.
Yeah, it's one piece of physical media of Jaws that I don't have. I have the VHS, I have the DVDs, I have the Blu-rays, I have the 4Ks. But it is what it is. But so I feel as if that was one of the first documentaries of its kind. You know, that's another. I could be wrong. Maybe somebody can correct me, but I also feel like that's another first for Jaws to have such a comprehensive making of. You know, which that guy Laurent Bozero or whatever you call him, he's doing the new documentary for the new 4K. But he actually, Frenchman, he was seeing these like behind the scene photographs of the movie and deleted scenes which weren't in the movie, and he was wondering how did they actually do that? You know, why is it not in the movie? And it was him that actually thought, wonder, could I interview the cast and crew and make a documentary in the making of Jaws? And you know, I suppose it's like everything, John. It just kind of snowballed. Maybe he thought he was going to do like a 10-minute piece or a half an hour documentary. It snowballed into a 2-hour documentary, and he got to interview Roy Scheider and Steven Spielberg and Richard Dreyfuss and, you know, all the main players back then, back in the early 90s, who were all still alive. And Jaws was still fairly fresh in their minds because when you think about it now, like that documentary was made, they were closer to 75 than we are to 95 now.
That's crazy. Yeah, because that's 30 years ago, and that was in celebration of its 20th anniversary. So they're celebrating 50 now. It's crazy when you think about things like that. Like I don't remember if it was in the Jaws documentary or something I read today, where when you think about Jaws in 1975, oh no, it was in Close Encounters. Close Encounters comes out in 77, and early in the movie, you think about these planes came from World War II. I'm thinking about it from our perspective in 2025, like that's 80 years ago now. In 1977, it's only 30 years ago. Like it's not that long ago. They were all alive to remember it. It's just, you know, that's it. Just time just keeps moving so much further forward. Like even like that first making of, one thing I was noticing is like you said, it's like one of the first of its kind. You notice that they don't really cut in as much footage from the film as they're talking. They leave a lot of takes on them, like actually just speaking and keeping the camera on them. And then when you watch the it's almost like a follow-up. The shark is still working. Like they have that more footage. It moves along at a quicker pace and a lot more B-roll footage, almost like has in that 10-year span how documentary filmmaking had changed in the making of sense.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. And what actually happened that original documentary, John, was when the first DVD release came out in 2000, Universal added that documentary down so that it would only ever been on the Laserdisc. They added it down to 50 minutes. And I didn't realize at the time I watched it that I enjoyed the 50-minute version, but when I found it was a 2-hour version, it was raging. And I think a lot of fans were. And then when they released the 30th anniversary, it was a double disc, which had the full version of that documentary. It was 2 hours long. And then The Shark is Still Working. That was independently made. That wasn't made by Universal. That was independently made by Jaws fans. They went out of their way to make a comprehensive making of legacy movie about all the Jaws, well, mainly Jaws, and there was stuff about the sequels and all in there, and they actually went to Universal because they owned the rights and asked them could they release it. They showed it around a few limited cinemas, and people were loving it. I was reading things online about how great this documentary is, one of the best documentaries you'll ever see, and about Jaws. And they went to Universal to release it, and Universal wouldn't do it for whatever reason. Universal would not let them release it, or didn't want to release it. And then all of a sudden, when the Blu-ray was being released, they decided to put it on as a feature. And from what I heard, then they were in negotiation of they wanted to edit it. So the version on the Blu-ray and the 4K is not the full version. It's
Really?
edited down. Yes, they edited it. And I have a copy of the full version. I watched it once. I haven't watched it again. I must go back and watch the full thing. I don't know how much longer it is, but it goes a wee bit more in depth into the release and the sequels and things like that. So it's disappointing to me Universal felt that they had to go and do a re-edit. So as you say about documentary filmmaking, obviously it did change, but I don't, I think it's some of that reasoning is because the fans were kind of doing it as well, and I don't know how much influence Universal had on the edit once it came out on the Blu-ray as well. I need to go back and watch that original version.
Yeah, well, that is fascinating. I mean, one thing I noticed while watching the documentaries is Richard Dreyfuss is a great interview. I really enjoyed him in both of them, like the energy and the stories that he would bring. He felt like, sometimes Richard Dreyfuss can be a little bit of a curmudgeon, but he just seemed like genuinely happy to do these interviews, and I love hearing things like that.
Yeah, exactly. I thought they were all of them were very good on it. Apparently Roy Scheider narrated it, and apparently the guys, I remember reading at the time. This is just through memory now, so I might get maybe details wrong or whatever, but it's just basically the guys that actually asked to interview him for Jaws. Apparently at that time he wasn't well. He'd been diagnosed with cancer, and he invited him up to his house, I think in New Jersey, and they went up to meet him. And they says that, that old saying about never meet your heroes. They said, well, this doesn't apply to Roy Scheider. It was like he was better than what they imagined meeting Roy Scheider, Chief Brody, would be. Says he surpassed their expectations. He was just so gracious and so welcoming and so nice, and made them feel at home, and was a great interviewer. And not only that, I don't know if they said it to him or he offered them. He says, I'll narrate the documentary for you. And he narrated it for them. Which I think was one of the last things he done. I think this documentary came out officially in 2005. He passed away in 2008, but I know he wasn't well for a while. But I was going to ask you, John, so what age were you then when you watched Jaws with Dennis? I'm just wondering.
I was probably, because I'm trying to remember, I was probably 8 or 9 years old. So this wasn't my first Spielberg movie.
Still young enough, but
yeah, I had seen E.T. and Jurassic Park at a much younger age, and even Poltergeist I had seen before this at way too young of an age as well. But when I finally caught up to this, it just didn't resonate as much as you would think. And it was a surprise because that resonated with other people. And even Dennis was also the first person I saw Gremlins with. He also, similar situation, showed me that. And I loved Gremlins immediately.
So you didn't have that kind of fear of when you went to bed that night, don't put your foot over the edge of the bed because a shark might come up and get you, even though it's not logical. You were logically thinking, well, the shark can't be here because I'm not in the water.
Yeah.
Whereas us kids, when we went to bed after watching Jaws, we were afraid to get out of bed.
Yeah. I was more, exactly. I was more I'm never going. I hate the beach as it is. This is just another reason not to go to the beach. I'm I don't want to go in the sand. Forget the ocean. So, I don't know. Things. I guess my fears were, I guess, a little bit different. I was petrified of Poltergeist when I first saw it. For a long time. Because that's kind of what scares me. Is I watch TV. I love TV. What if I get stuck in the TV? That's something that would kind of scare me. The shark, I'm and I guess I just never had a fascination in general, just because another thing is I used to go to we could go to the aquarium for free when I was a kid, because the job my dad worked for, the owner of the company he worked for also owned the local aquarium, so you can go to it for free and everything. And you could see it was cool. It was the only place on Long Island you could go see sharks. I didn't even care.
Well, I have to say that back then, in the 80s, so I think it messed up one of our other podcasts as well. It might have been the Jaws 3 and 4 podcast we've done. So that started my kind of fascination. I loved the movie Jaws. So when Jaws 2 was on the TV, that was another one that I was allowed to watch. And as I say, the people that slate the sequels, I mean, that's up to them. But for me, I don't think I'd be as big a Jaws fan as I am without the sequels. I think the sequels also helped me with that fascination, because back then I still do love the whole franchise, but I didn't differentiate back then. You know, I loved all the movies. Well, I'd seen 2 and 3 on television, and while watching the movie, I was terrified, but it wasn't a terrified kind of switch it off or hide behind the sofa or hide behind my hands. It was a terrified kind of glued edge of my seat, glued to the screen kind of thing. And I then became fascinated with sharks. So that was, as I mentioned on our Spielberg podcast, this is the movie that made me a movie fan. It made me want to learn about movies, and it also gave me this fascination with the shark. And I still have that fascination to this day. And I don't have it as strong as I used to, because as you get older, other things become priorities in your life, and you don't have, as we explained earlier, you don't have much time to do other things. And there was a time in my life where you go to yourself, maybe I could be a marine biologist, and that's because off the back of Jaws, or maybe I could be in movies, maybe I can be a director, and things like that. But obviously I didn't pursue that or go down the right path. It's very difficult where I am. And but another thing that I didn't mention on the Spielberg podcast, which I should have mentioned, and I forgot, I remembered afterwards, was another thing that Jaws actually gave me as well, was it brought out my creative side, because I then would just sit and draw sharks over and over and over again. I would draw scenes from Jaws over and over and over again, and that brought out my creative side. And also I also, when I was young, I would make like plasticine sharks, and then I made the orca out of Lego before that was a thing, before that was fashionable, before movie Lego was fashionable.
Probably before the prices shot up too, right?
It was well, I mean, it was a case of taking apart all the other Lego I had. You know what I mean? So I don't know how much that cost, but you're right. The price of Lego now it's crazy, but it's a lot of that Lego now, John's, for collectors, it's for adults. But
things have changed. That's what it is. They're releasing them like almost like how they release the toy lines now. It's like they know who their audience is. Like it used to be like the father would look at it, but he's like, I don't want to get judged a little bit by buying this. Now it's like the kid, it's like you knock the kid over to grab it.
I got my Jaws Lego. My daughter looked at it and I says, "You're not building this."
Yeah, not for you.
It's not for you. I'll buy you something to build. I know what I mean. You're not touching this one. So as I say, so Jaws, as I said in the Spielberg podcast, it made me who I am today. That was the influence that this movie had on me, and also that I should have mentioned on the Spielberg podcast as well, is that Jaws is the movie that made me a lover of film music as well, because it was the Jaws score which opened that door for me to then go down the road of Batman 89 and and this one and this one and this one, and then I realized, you know what, I actually love film music. It's not just Jaws, it's actual music for movies, and in particular, of course, John Williams. But I like other composers, Jerry Goldsmith, you know what I mean, John Barry, people like that. But so I have a massive soundtrack collection, and as I say, so Jaws opened so many doors for me creatively that way.
Yeah, I guess this is exactly like John Williams does open up. Like, it's amazing. Like, we kind of came in an era where movies and the scores to movies, like, they were so instrumental with each other. Like, just Steven Spielberg, I don't think his films get to that epic level without the John Williams score. But if you go back and like watch movies in like the 50s, 60s, you wouldn't even be like 70s. Some movies won't even have a score. And like now, it's like you don't even realize how much of the music does the heavy lifting. And in a movie like Jaws, that's all you needed was a score.
Yeah, I feel like Spielberg and Williams brought back the big score for the movie, and that's what we got then off the back end of the 70s and through the 80s. And it's kind of went away again. It's just noise now. It's just like more for atmosphere and stuff. And I hate film scores now. Well, I hate film scores now. I don't hate, but I just don't think they're as good as they used to be.
That's another reason. That's why I actually thought you might like the Batman a little bit more than you did, because I felt like that Michael Giacchino score was so instrumental with the actual entire movie that I was like, yeah, I kind of might feel like it, because a lot of the Hans Zimmer scores with the Dark Knight movies, they literally started to become noise. And I love Hans Zimmer, but you could see the different sides of Hans Zimmer, whereas John Williams, I feel like throughout there he was still the same John Williams.
Well, one thing I did like about the Batman was the score. I liked the main title. I like how they integrated the Nirvana song into it as well. I liked all that. There was different reasons why I didn't like the actual movie. It's not to say it was a bad mistake. It's like The Dark Knight Rises, I think, has a tremendous score, but I don't like the movie. I don't think it's a great movie. But yes, you're going to hear me fawning over John Williams throughout this whole podcast, because the fact of the matter is that one thing I love about the Jaws soundtrack is that, you know, there's something like 24 tracks or whatever, and every one of them are different. He's not playing the same thing over and over again. Everything is completely different for each scene that he's orchestrating for, and it's perfect, John. Every scene is perfect with his music.
Yeah, I agree. It works so well in this, and it's funny. This is the first time they teamed up. It was actually the year before in the Sugarland Express, and
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, well, it was because I just watched that for the first time. I'm watching it, and I'm like, the score, for this is just not as it's incredible. That only 1 year later he does the Jaws score, and that's so big of a part of the movie. Whereas in Sugarland Express, it's good, but it's not something that stands out.
Yeah, well, I remember that Spielberg said himself that he always wanted to work with John Williams, so he was aware of John Williams before the Sugarland. And and Spielberg says himself, I think this is in the documentary what you were talking about. He says when he said yes to Sugarland, I wanted to work with him for the rest of my career, which he basically did. But I know that Williams said himself that Jaws was the first movie he scored that he truly loved. He says the first movie I've seen that I truly loved. So it just shows you, he's seen this movie and he fell in love with the movie without any music. So right away, he probably knew what he needed to do. And
It's
I,
like
and I
they had to
suppose that
find each
shows.
other.
What's that?
It's almost like they had to find each other, like they were the missing
Mm-hmm.
piece to each other's work, because until they teamed up, I don't know, I can't really name off the top of my head what John Williams did much before Jaws, but after this,
Mm-hmm.
2 years later in 77, he does Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Star Wars in the same year. Like, it was a better year than that.
And then the following year, he done Superman.
Yeah,
And it's just like, you're right. I think they complement each other. I mean, Spielberg has never shied away with what John Williams has done for his movies and what John Williams has done for his own career, Spielberg's career. And Spielberg basically says he retells my movies in music. And Spielberg is a big fan of movie soundtracks. So he is. He had a collection himself, and he used to listen to movie soundtracks while thinking of ideas for movies and writing movies himself, which I know people still do that to this day, listen to soundtracks to get them in the mood to write. You're right that, I suppose it's a case of Spielberg bringing out the best in Williams and Williams maybe bringing out the best in Spielberg too. Imagine having somebody there you can just rely on, where you can just turn around and go, like I've heard Spielberg say, I don't tell them what I want. Where I've heard other directors tell their composers, well, I want this and I want that. And we've talked about James Cameron falling out with composers, whereas and I'm sure. Listen, James Cameron might be good at other things, art direction ways, and might have a point to pull people up on how to do things. But I'm bet he couldn't compose anything. But where Spielberg respects that line in the sand, that the trust, no pun intended, to trust Williams to turn around and say, "Listen, there's my movie, write me a score, bring it back." And he talked about Jaws. About the thing about Jaws was that when John Williams brought him in to actually play the score on his piano in his studio. Spielberg says, I was so excited. I couldn't wait to hear this. I was waiting on to hear something very melodic, mysterious and kind of undersea music. And he says he played at the piano. And he says, Spielberg says, I started laughing. And he says, because John Williams has a great sense of humor. He says, I thought he was making a joke. And if John Williams went, no, that's it. And Spielberg was like, that's it. And Spielberg said himself, I left the meeting thinking, my film's doomed after what I went through. But he says, no, once he heard it on the orchestra, he says right away, it was right,
Yeah. Well, I think it's very simple, and this might actually be a good time to get in because you hear the score right in the beginning. It seems so simple, and it's the joke you make. I literally remember in school, I'm sure everybody went through this in school, where somebody, like when you're in music class, would go to the piano and play the Jaws theme, and everyone thinks they know that's the Jaws theme, but there's so much more in the actual theme of Jaws. When you actually listen to it, it's not that simple. It just seems like it's that simple. It almost gets over exaggerated.
Do you know what? Like, it's like I said to you, I was watching a few in that Spielberg episode, watching a few first time watches. It's easy. I like to just put it on in the background if I don't want to listen to a podcast or music, and I love seeing people's reactions to Jaws, and it's usually younger people who have never seen Jaws, and as soon as the opening titles start and they hear that, they're all kind of giddy. They're like, "Oh, I've heard this before," but they see once the full Jaws music actually hits, they look terrified because the data over the years has also almost became a joke right? Everybody was a da 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 come and get you. But once they hear that proper theme in full swing, under the water, the shark moving along, and they're seeing the visuals along with the full score, they are terrified. And I laugh every time. I love to see it. I'm just like, it's great because right away they know, oh shit, this isn't a joke. This is terrifying.
It's incredible. It is honestly, it leads right in. And before, like, just right away, because we started off with the opening credits, but the opening actual, I always forget this movie's rated PG, and I'm always surprised at that.
Yeah, exactly. So as I say, I don't. That's not me getting into the movie. It's just me talking about that. So we'll get in that. But yes, it was rated PG, and a wee bit of background about the PG rating is that in the States, look, you make no better than me. I know it was rated PG. It might have been rated what they call G in the UK, but that was before my time. It was always PG and VHS. But basically, there was like, well, how many was there ratings? Was there, John? 3?
Back when we had it, like when this movie came out, there was G, PG, and R. And when you watch the movie, it looks like an R-rated movie to me. And I also wanted to ask you, what do you consider this? Like, because I was talking today with Dennis about, like, Rolling Stone put the Texas Chainsaw Massacre as the #1 horror film of all time. But is this a horror film? Like, it's got horror elements, but
Yeah.
do you personally consider this a straightforward horror film?
Yeah. Firstly, I want to say about the PG rating, and everybody, I've heard a lot of people talk about this PG rating, and I was listening to something last week, and people were talking about, oh, I can't believe it's PG and blah blah blah. And I can't remember what film it was, whether it was Jaws or maybe one of the indie movies or something like that. Might have been Temple of Doom. I think people fail to forget PG doesn't mean anybody can watch it. PG is parental guidance. It means that as you as a parent are meant to sit down and judge whether or not that movie is okay for your child, right? You should know your child better than anybody, right? So
Yeah.
you should be able to sit down and say, this movie isn't for my child. So I think people are shielding their responsibility here by thinking that anybody can just walk in and watch a PG movie. Now, however, I do understand maybe the concerns for Jaws is concerned, because when you get to Jaws 2, it's very toned down, and that was a PG, and I think that was a conscious effort because of the backlash that Jaws got because of how scary it was, and
You see
how
limbs, that's where it's like,
blood.
okay, and here in the United States, you can walk in a theater when it's PG, no matter what age, and they let you in. Like, if your parents are irresponsible, your parents are irresponsible, but the usher can't turn you away.
Yeah, well, I think that was the same here, John, to be perfectly honest with you. Or maybe you needed a parent with you. I can't remember. But the thing is that you're right. When Jaws first went to the censors, it was given an R rating, and they basically they believed that it should be lower, the filmmakers. So what actually happened was that David Brown, the producer, he went to the MPAA?
MPAA.
MPAA. He went there and he argued the case that Jaws wasn't about a serial killer running down the street killing people. It was nature. It was based on real life, and they agreed, but there were certain trims that they wanted to make to the movie. So they trimmed a wee bit off the leg floating down in the estuary scene, a few frames off that. I think that's all they trimmed off it to get a PG rating. So that's basically how they got a PG rating for Jaws. But I know there was a bit of a backlash, and David Brown said himself, I never heard any children complaining. The only people were complaining were adults. They were terrified. So I believe there was a conscious effort then when Jaws 2 came around to kind of ensure that it was a PG rating. And if you watch Jaws 2, it's a lot more tamer than Jaws in regards to the shark attacks.
Yeah, that is very true. Even though the shark does blow up crazily into, but Joe, what also got to remember a different time. Like, we're looking back now, literally 50 years ago, just a different world. People were a little bit more hardened back then. I think thicker skin. They didn't get bothered by as much. Even like as we were growing up, if you watch like shows like that were around in the 80s and 90s, like a little bit darker themes kind of thrown in there compared to like what modern audiences see. Like, if this was a PG now, I mean, they would probably crucify Steven Spielberg.
But I think too as well, John, we're coming at a time where, it's the mid-70s. Jaws was filmed in a way that was very realistic. Like we were talking about before about realistic, gritty films coming along. I think Jaws is one of those movies that kind of pushed the barriers. Nobody had really seen anything like this before. We've seen a lot of blood and guts since, especially with the slasher movies that came after Halloween. But back then, you didn't really see as much blood and gore movies.
No, that's very true. It was definitely, especially in 75.
Yeah, and it's not that Jaws has an awful lot of blood and gore. I don't think it does. No. But the attacks, the way they're filmed, the way they're shot, are so impactful. And when you do see that blood, it's it's a combination of things. When you've got 3 attacks in the movie that actually have blood, but they're few and far between. I mean, they're few and far between, and they're very shocking when they happen. So it's not like a gore fest, but I still think at that time, there wasn't too many movies that were kind of doing that, so it was very shocking for people to see.
Yeah.
Can you think of anything before '75 that had blood like Jaws in it?
Not to that like gory standpoint. I mean, we had like Dirty Harry's a few years before that. Like there's vibe, but that's an R. Like I can't
Yeah.
really think of anything like had that much like the brutality. I mean, The Godfather. I mean, when James Caan gets killed at the guard booth, like that's brutal. That at the time was known for the amount of squibs like that took. That was, I mean, it was overkill.
Yeah, exactly. It was. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. But even then, there's not much blood. A wee bit of blood comes out of his mouth, and there's not much blood. You don't really see too much blood flying off him.
I mean, even in this movie, like towards the beginning, like we don't see the body, as we see the reactions. Like we can imagine more of like how violent it is. Like now, like even in some exploitation films, like they'll show everything.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's suggested, and your imagination is doing an awful lot of the work. So it is. No, I'll be honest with you, John. I don't consider it a horror film, and to be controversial, I hate when horror fans try and lump it in with as a horror film. I feel as if they just want to claim it
They
because
do.
because they're fans of it, right?
They want to have both, as if they can't just be a fan of a different genre.
Yeah, I feel the same about Silence of the Lambs. To be honest with you, it's not a horror movie either.
I know. I do like to
try and
claim
claim that.
I do personally like to, just because it's the one horror movie the Academy Awards actually recognize, but I also don't think it's a horror movie. It's a thriller.
Yeah, and I agree with Jaws. I think I'd mentioned this on our original podcast, but I'll go over it again just to try and be clear about it. It's just basically, I don't consider Jaws a horror. Now, I am a horror fan, so I have actually, over the recent years, I've accepted it as, if you want to consider Jaws a horror film, then, me personally, I'm quite happy to do that, because then it's in my ballpark, right? We can talk about it. If we want to do a horror podcast, let's talk about Jaws. Okay. But for me, my favorite horror movie is Psycho. My favorite movie is Jaws. And if you were to narrow it down to one genre, to me, it's a thriller, right? But I think the genius thing that Spielberg does about this movie, and I think this makes it doubly terrifying because it lulls you into a false sense of security, is that this movie has so many different genres going for it. I mean, it's based on a novel. There's a lot of drama going on the island, to the point where it's not boring. It's all relevant, and it heightens the tension. And then you have comedy in there too, with how the characters play off each other. And then you have those adventure moments when they're out hunting the shark. And then you have your horror moments as well, when the shark is attacking. Even when they're out at sea in the second part of the movie, it soon turns from an adventure story into a nightmare.
It absolutely does.
The hunter becomes the hunted. So I think it's got a lot of. That's why I say, in essence, if it was one genre, it's a thriller, right? Because you're on the edge of your seat watching this movie from start to finish. Yes, there's scary moments in it, there's horror moments in it, but there's very lighthearted moments in it, there's fun moments in it, there's great characterizations. So that is, and the music reflects that all the way through. The music, John Williams' score reflects that all the way through. So that's why I wouldn't. If you would ask me straight to consider a horror movie, the answer is no.
I just want to get clarification from the expert,
Yeah. Well, that's what I think anyway. People have been known to disagree with me, saying sharks are scary, getting eaten by a shark is scary. Yeah, but there's loads of things that are scary, but in life, but you wouldn't consider your life a horror movie. Well, maybe you would.
I mean, some are. I mean, I have some horrific moments in my life every day. When I gotta go to work, it's like I don't want to do that, but I have to.
So maybe you do consider your life a horror movie.
I mean, I don't consider the movie Fearless a horror movie, and that's it's got a plane crash in it. But that's the thing I'm afraid of most in life, is dying in a plane crash. But I don't think that people would consider that a horror movie.
Yeah, exactly. Horrific things happen in life, and what I mean is horrific things can happen in movies, but it doesn't necessarily mean the overarching theme of the movie's horror. To me, it's not. And of course, I also think that Jaws kind of sets a lot of horror tropes and a lot of horror convention. Because it was mid-70s, it was kind of before that era of, if you're going to have sex, you're going to die. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Jaws does that. And then you have Jaws 2 with the teens, which came out before Halloween as well, which people say Jaws 2 is like Jaws as a slasher movie, and the shark has a scar on its face and all that business. So I do think in a lot of senses that the movie did terrify people because because sharks are real, and they had this whole kind of idea that if you go in the water, that you could be attacked and killed and by a shark and devoured by a shark, and that is horrific. But I just don't believe the movie as a whole is considered a horror. That's all. I think the movie, I think 3 and 4 feel more like a horror movie than the original of the second
especially
one.
of the time. Those did feel like 80s horror movies, like especially horror sequels. Like, nah, let's just go for it, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's where I think they tried to make them more dramatic like the originals, but unfortunately, I think it just didn't. I think it didn't work for them, especially the fourth one and the third one, where it is a lot more gorier and stuff. But what I will say before we get into it, of course, because this is a 50th anniversary special, is that we're going to split the podcast up into two. So we're basically going to do up until the first half of the movie here, of most of the land scenes, and then we're going to do the second part is going to be when they go out on the hunt to kill the shark.
And as you can see from the amount of time we've just spent on that, and even though we swore we wouldn't spend that much time on pre-production, we're still 45 minutes in, so it has to be split into two parts.
It has to be at this stage, but we didn't spend too much on pre-production. We just talk about our feelings on the movie, which I think is nice to do before we dive into the movie. Because sometimes when we do the movie as we do chronologically, we could talk about it, but we don't feel the need to talk about it as much as maybe we used to.
Yeah, like this definitely is a different structured show. And also, there's so many people who have talked about Jaws. We got to put our own personal twist on it.
Yeah, there's so much going on with the celebrations this year as well. It's nice to get a couple of episodes out there as well to get our thoughts out there. So we'll start and get into the movie, John.
Yeah, and obviously the first thing you see is that Universal logo. Is this the first movie you think of with that Universal logo?
100%. This is the classic for me. There's a handful in my movie going life, and this one that the space and the stars kind of, and then all of a sudden it just appears with like the mist around the earth. I don't know what that is. And but I had Jaws 2 on VHS before I had Jaws 1 on VHS. So it's kind of like I'm kind of thinking to myself, does it remind me more of 2 than 1? I'm not sure. But one thing both movies have going for them is this chirping sound in the background. Did you notice that? And
Yeah.
I love how, I mean, it's unique to Jaws. And I've heard things online recently, John, that people saying that it's Spielberg's reference to the birds, and it's birds. Now, I read a story years ago that I think it was from somebody that worked on the movie who done the sound, that actually said it's shrimp.
Oh, you know what? That would be interesting. And that would make sense from where they go from there into there. Like usually a lot of time you either have the opening sound, whatever the opening sound is for the actual logo, like whatever the company sound is, or sometimes they allow the directors to play around with it. And I thought that's what he was doing with this movie. So
Yeah, well,
that would make sense.
I've seen people online say recently that, and look, I've seen, especially around this time of year when Jaws is highly on the media because of its 50th. There's an awful lot of stuff out there, and I'm reading a lot of stories which are just fake, total fake news, and just totally not true or over exaggerated or totally wrong. I'm seeing it all over the place, but I've been seeing for a while people saying that these are birds, and it's Spielberg's nod to Alfred Hitchcock, and Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. And to be honest with you, I have never heard or seen anybody say that involved with the production. I did read a story many years ago from the sound man who says it's shrimp, and they put a microphone down, and you can't hear shrimp, but whatever microphone they used, they picked up this strange sound, and it was shrimp, and that's what you can hear at the start of the movie. That do 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 do, and you hear it as well at the start of Jaws 2, and that's when you hear the first. And I love that then when you see like a Zanuck Brown production, and then it does the again, and then that's when it comes up like what comes up after that? I think it just comes up like Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the layered font, which would actually appear on the movie poster, which I think is awesome. I like how they did that, like showing that these are the three men, these are your stars of the film, and really, by the end of the day, that's who it comes down to, and just foreshadowing right in the beginning.
Yeah, and it's really funny when I was watching the play. That was one of the scenes that they actually argued over, because Roy Scheider said that I'm the star of the movie. No, Richard Dreyfuss implied that he was just going to be the star of the movie because his film had just come out, The Apprenticeship of Dudley Kravitz, and it was doing well, and he was gloating about it, and he insinuates that they're his co-stars, And the next thing was Roy Scheider says, well, it's my movie. It's, I'm the star. And Robert Shaw says, well, my publicist just gave me this. And it was an advertisement about the production of Jaws. And it had the layout exactly, which is on the movie, which is on the poster. And they are both horrified or stunned that Robert Shaw was in the middle above the both of them.
It's funny because it feels like Roy Scheider's movie, like really, like he's the guy you focus on, even though it does, because like there's long stretches where you don't see Robert Shaw.
Yeah, well, I feel as if it is Roy Scheider's movie. I mean, I said before in the original podcast we done on Jaws was that basically Roy Scheider is the audience. We view everything through Roy Scheider's eyes. We're learning as Roy Scheider's learning. We're like, he's a fish out of water in this movie, being in this town. So we're like him. We're learning about Amity. We're learning about fishing. We're learning about sharks. As from the townsfolk, from Hooper, from Quint, as the movie evolves. So basically, as Roy Scheider says in documentaries, when he succeeds at the end, we feel like we have succeeded because we're with him. We're seeing everything through his eyes. And so for me, Roy Scheider is the star. I feel as if Shaw and Dreyfuss are the co-stars. But you're right. I mean, for Robert Shaw to come into the movie, and you see him, I think, in 2 scenes. But for him to really come into the movie, he's an hour in before he actually comes into the movie. He's only in the movie for the final hour. What an impact he makes for just being in the movie for that final hour. But yeah, next thing is camera fades in, we're underwater, the Jaws music is in full swing, and then it comes up in big white lettering, Jaws, and it's the exact same font that they've used on the Jaws hardback, paperback, the novel. And yeah, the score is tremendous. I just love that when the sharks just go through the water.
Yeah, right before you actually get into the first scene, it's like it's a POV of the shark, which would become iconic in this film because we don't see the shark that much, but we do see these scenes of him moving along underwater. And I love the actual font of Jaws, and I like that it's in whiteness. When most people probably think of the red font, but the paperback books had it, I think, in even blue font.
Yeah.
Because I think the actual movie poster is of the back of the paperback originally that they just kind of shifted over. So, I mean, it's iconic. It's one of the most classic looking fonts ever.
Yeah, the poster. Yeah, the poster's taken from the paperback version rather than the hardback. The paperback was that, and the font was in blue. But obviously, I suppose it makes sense for the poster to be red. But I agree with you. I like that it's white in the movie. It's like great weight, it's it's weight, but they do it in red and Jaws too, and I'm happy with that because that's like them 2 movies are differentiated. Then one's blue and red, and the other one's white and like a more of a greenish.
Steven Spielberg, other than the Jaws font, the actual font that he's using for like the titles, like the names and everything, that black, just very simple black with white font. Like he uses that pretty much throughout most of his movies for a while. Like once we even get to I always think of, I don't even think of usually Jaws right away. I think of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like that's the same thing. Just kind of like Steven Spielberg style.
It's just white with a wee bit of a black kind of shadow behind it. Comes up on the screen. Yeah, that's right. So I also think as well, I love it because I love every aspect of this movie, but I also kind of feel as if it's of its time as well. It's kind of like just what they were doing in the 70s. With the white kind of font like that. It's nothing too fancy. It's nice enough, but it's nothing too fancy.
Yeah, they got too crazy with it when they finally were able to do it all with computers, and then they went too far. And now you kind of see them simplifying it again.
Yeah, I think it's better simplified. And not only that, with the black and the white and the music slowly building up at the very start, that kind of fade into under the ocean. It's just like it's like a play. The lights come up, we're on. We're in. We've started. And of course, back then you had to put credits at the start of your movie. There was some kind of legality around it. So now we're on the beach party and we're panning across on the beach, and we see there's a load of people on the beach, and we see a fire lit, and everybody's having a great time. Somebody's playing a guitar, and of course, as it pans along, we see some more of the credits, and it just as always, I always love it. Just ends directed by Steven Spielberg, and who the hell knew what was gonna become of this man as time went on.
Yep, that's like the foreshadow of like this guy's career about to start, like right in this opening scene. I mean, it's a beautiful scene on the beach at a time when nobody would do that now, but that at a time like, especially I live on Long Island, and that's what beaches look like around here. So it's pretty cool to see it like that, because I've seen people do things like this, but the way that he moves the camera along, and like you almost have like a lens flare with the fire off of it, beautiful looking shot.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I love, like, you can't really hear what's going on in the background, but you hear somebody saying something about he's an amputee. And it always strikes me, he's an amputee. It's like, yeah, a few people are going to be amputated very soon.
Yep, might as that guy's about to get a lot of work, and obviously he's unfortunately he'll get in some trouble when the fugitive rolls around.
Yeah. So so we see this guy kind of looking at this girl, and that's Cassidy. I guess Tom Cassidy, you call him, I think, in the book. And he actually sees this lovely looking blonde girl. And I love how there's no dialogue here. You just see him get up and walk over and sit down beside her, and then they talk. You see them kind of talking, and then the next thing she gets up and runs up the sand dunes. And that's when you hear him saying, "What's her name again?" And she says, "Chrissy." And where we're going, swimming. And they start running along those picket fences, and she starts stripping off. And I love as well how she's like, and you can see it better now on the Blu-ray and 4K than you ever did. I remember like having like the VHS, it was a lot darker. I don't know if that was intentional. But yes, of course, when she takes her top off, you can see a lot more. And you hear him saying, "I'm definitely coming. Hold on." And of course, she strips down, skinny dips, and runs into the water for a night swim, John.
I know what a night that's going to be for her and him, or at least they were hoping it would be. And I think one thing you notice with the 4K nowadays is they clearly shot this, I think, over different days, because like when they're running along, like you'll see sometimes it'll feel very overcasty, and then other times it feels like the clouds have moved along and you can see the sun peeking through. Like,
Yeah.
so like it's like, well, like I feel like that's what 4K kind of exposes. That's something you've never even seen before.
Yeah. Well, I think this was filmed day for night.
Like they used to do back in like it does kind of have that look on it.
Well, I'm near certain the actual attack was. I don't know about running along the beach. It might have been too dark to kind of film at night. But as I say, I know what you're saying about the sun, because sometimes it's like behind the clouds and sometimes it's not. And I'm just kind of thinking maybe in my mind, I'm probably going to make excuses for this because I don't want to ruin the illusion. Maybe it's just the angle of the camera.
Well, that's how I was trying to think.
When you're down the beach, you can see the sun. When you're a wee bit up the beach, the clouds are moving clouds.
Very well then, because when she goes into the water, the way the angle is, and I think it's a beautiful shot of her running in the water. It looks like it's the ocean's lit by the moonlight, and I'm like, but the sun was just out.
Yeah, it's almost like I obviously, yeah, I think it's day for night, but it's almost kind of like the sun's just coming up. That's the way.
Oh, that actually how it looked like it's like 4 a.m. kind of look. That is very more believable, because it was kind of. I mean, when we first opened, there was like the beach, the fire is overwhelming, all the lighting of the scene.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, he can't make it, and he falls down the sand dunes. He can't make it in the water. He's that drunk. He doesn't make it in. Yeah, and well, lucky for him.
Well, yeah, it worked out in the end, but he thought he was going to get something good that night. He's probably still disappointed until he found out what happened.
Exactly. At the time you're going, damn, but he would have been a victim as well, I think. And but of course, yeah, we see that classic then point of view of her swimming above, and then you could maybe say there's Moon Knight coming through, but when she's swimming across, and of course it's inspired by Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Great movie.
Yep, and then we start hearing the Jaws music as the shark slowly moves up towards her, and of course then you get that first jerk down in that first pool where the shark is kind of toying with her. It maybe doesn't know what she is. It's kind of like, what is this dangling down here? I'll just take a wee nibble.
Yeah, and that's what he does at first. And I mean, those shots are great, and how like the body's like getting thrown around, like just the force of the shark.
Yeah, and that's a great thing as well, is what they're actually trying to do. They're just trying to show the power of the shark in this stage of the movie. And to a certain extent, I think the shark is just kind of playing with her a wee bit. I know that, this is greatly inspired by the novel, this attack at the start of the movie. It's very accurate to the novel. And it's right away, like that just sets the tone for the whole film. That open attack is horrifying, the way she's screaming. It really does.
Yeah, it is horrifying. And I mean, it's a perfect way to open up your film.
Yeah, it gets people's attention just like that, I think, and that's it. You're engrossed from the very start. You're hooked, after that horrific attack. And then I love how, like, once she's gone, all that screaming and stuff and hanging off the boy, it just goes silent. And he's lying sleeping on the beach. You let a wee burp, and yeah, and it just shows you the ocean. It's just quiet again. It's as if nothing ever happened. She's gone. That's it, just like that. And they fade into the water the next day, and of course this shadow comes into frame, and it's Chief Brody.
Yeah, great transition, by the way. I mean, I know it's probably simple to do, but I always love night to day transitions like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and get to meet Chief Brody for the first time. And I always think it's kind of funny because he's like, they're talking about he's new here in town. He was a New York City cop, I believe, right?
Yeah, so this is where we meet the Brodies for the first time in the Brody residence. And yeah, of course, he makes the comment about how come the sun never used to shine in here. And she says, "We this is summer, we bought the house in the fall." So so right away it's telling you that he's new in town. At this stage, you don't know who he is, unless you've read the book, but you don't know who he is. And then it says about the kids and must be in the backyard, and she says, "In the Amity, you say yeah," and then he tries to do that Massachusetts accent, doesn't he? And he says, "How's that?" And she says, "Like from New York." So so that's telling you, oh, they're from New York, they're in Massachusetts somewhere. And I like then Hack cuts to the next scene where Michael comes through, and they all these wee kind of creepy kind of foreshadowing that Spielberg does throughout this movie. It just sticks with you. Stuck with me as a child, where he comes in, his hands cut, and he's like, "Look, Mama got cut." And Brody says, and this is one thing I love about Brody as well throughout the movie, John. He's always like, because he's like, we talk about getting older and being busy, and you have less time. Like, he literally doesn't have time to do the stuff around the house, like fix things. They've only just moved in, maybe a load of months. He doesn't have the time to fix the time at home to fix things because he's so busy with dealing with the stuff in the town. And he's like, "Bet you were playing those swings. I haven't had time to fix them yet." And Mike says, "I get bit by a vampire."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, so Ellen says, "Look, I'll clean you up." And then his phone goes. And people get confused about why has he got two phones in the house? Well, it's quite simple. One's a home phone and one's a work phone.
Yeah, they got to remember the time. I think that people forget that because I kind of figured that out because those kinds of phones, my grandfather was a cop. So
Right?
my grandparents kind of had phones like that in their house. They had rotary phones. Like, I don't see them anymore. I haven't seen them like over 20 years, but I could just remember that in their house. Their house still looked like that.
Yeah. Well, listen, I remember easily that rotary phones and stuff and the phones on the wall, or you even had like phone chairs in the hallway where you could sit down and your phone was beside it. You could have a conversation while sitting down, you know, and rather than just one on the wall. But obviously, he's got one which is a home phone and he's got one which is a work phone. But it just kind of shows the clumsiness of Brody, and you'll see it a few times throughout the movie. He must always pick the wrong one up. The phone goes, or he get confused. He picks the wrong one up as a dead line, puts it down, and lifts the actual work phone up.
Well, that's like a very human thing to do because when you like you just said, like he's never got enough time at home. I could relate to this because I feel like rushing around and I'm always making the same mistake over and over. He's always in a rush because he never has time to actually genuinely relax. He's just always moving. And now
Yeah.
he's about to get more stuff piled onto him. But that's why he always makes those silly mistakes because it's the same silly mistakes that most people make when they're under more pressure. If we all had more time, you'll make less errors.
Yeah, exactly. It's like he's moved to this new town. He's a police chief. There's a lot of stuff to sort out. He's getting to know the people in the town. He probably wants to make a good impression. And of course, it's not saying that he's snubbing his family. It's like everybody. He's a working man. He has to pay the bills. And there's only so many hours in the day. And you'll see that throughout the movie where he kind of mentions about, need to fix this or need to fix that or I don't have time to do this. So that's the start of it there. He says, "I haven't had time to fix those swings yet." And he gets the phone call and you just hear him say, like, "Oh, what do they usually do? Wash up or float or what? I'll be down in 10 minutes or whatever." And the next thing is, in the background, this is something that Spielberg does, John, which I've seen him in behind the scenes that he wanted to bring back. And I don't know how many people were doing it before Spielberg, was overlapping conversations. He loved that in King Kong, and he does it a lot in this movie. So you can actually hear dialogue in the background with other people talking in the foreground. And he does it. I noticed as well, he done it in that episode of Columbo, because I was watching Columbo and I was going, "Look, he's doing it there." So he's already got this in his head about, you can hear conversations going on in the background, important information that isn't in the foreground that you can pick up. And he does it in Jewel, he does it in Sugarland, and he's doing it here again. And you hear Al in the background, or sorry, Michael in the background saying, "Can I go swimming?" And she's like, "Sure, go get a band-aid." And look, you sit and you think to yourself, "Oh my God, there's a shark out there and that child is going swimming. What's going to happen?" But it cuts to Brody and you hear him saying, it's 80 yard, but you hear him saying, "Gotta go, missing person. Nobody's even here yet." In other words, the summer people. And Michael runs down and runs into the water. And then, who's out playing on the swing? Sean is out playing on the swing, Sean Brody.
Yep, right after his brother just got cut. He doesn't care.
No, and Brody never says that, and he gets in
No,
the
because he forgot already.
yeah, he's too busy. So he jumps in the Jeep.
Yeah.
He actually takes his cup with him, his breakfast cup, and she says, "I want my cup back." And he says, "You'll get it." So he brings the cup with his tea in it in the Jeep. And yeah, I love this shot, John, when he pulls out of his driveway and he drives up the road, and the camera follows the Jeep, and you hear like the radio on telling you about the forecast and stuff, and it just swings around and stops at that big massive billboard. It says like Amity Island welcomes you.
Yep. Perfect setup and introduction to these characters. And yeah, like you were saying with the foreground, this is something that Spielberg does in a lot of his movies, and something he would also carry over to Poltergeist. Early in his movies, he'll set something up, and then we spend time with the family, and the families always feel very realistic. Feels like a busy morning in a household, like a regular house, like a regular family, and these feel like real people. And
Yes.
it's something that a lot of other directors have always struggled with, is making people feel real. It almost feels like, I like M. Night Shyamalan, and people have compared him to Spielberg. And one thing I always get, like, do you ever look at the dialogue delivery of those? Like, sometimes M. Night Shyamalan movies, the kids don't feel like kids; they feel like
Yeah.
adults, like speaking, or people feel like they're delivering the lines. Like, sometimes it works in his movies, but with Steven Spielberg, people feel like they're moving around naturally. Like, they don't feel like they're on sets.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing about this movie, was that like that's a real house. It's
Mhm.
not a set. So they rented that house and they filmed in it. Again, Martha's Vineyard, real location. Those were local kids. So he was able to cast them kids, and they're not natural actors, but he was able to get a natural performance out of them. And maybe part of that rawness was not being actors, But again, as you say about Spielberg, in the novel, Alan Brody and Martin Brody are having a lot of personal problems in their marriage, and there's a different conflict there. In this movie, there's a different dynamic. They're a very they seem to be a very nice family, a very strong family, and there doesn't seem to be any real issues there. It's like they're starting a new life for themselves on this island, and everything at this stage is going well for them.
Yeah, I like to imagine like he took like a safer job in this in like a different town after being a cop in New York City. And it's funny if you think of it, like, one thing people probably remember Roy Scheider before this was his character in The French Connection, a very different cop. But
Yeah, I've
maybe like
heard.
this is him settling down.
Yeah, but I've heard fan theories that it's the same character. He
Yeah.
just comes to Amity, but changes his name to settle down because he wants to get away from New York and the crime in New York. But of course, in the movie, John, it does hint that that's
Yeah.
the reason why he is at Amity,
Uh,
because of New York. Well, we'll get to those scenes. But then it goes into the beach where he's interviewing Cassidy. He's quizzing Cassidy basically here. Let me see what I've got written down here. Yeah, he's quizzing Cassidy about what happened to this girl. He's obviously called the police, thinking that she's drowned because he's obviously woken up and went, oh no, your woman. Well, no, I missed my chance, and seen all her clothes still laying on the beach. And went,
Holy
she had
shit.
she hasn't come back. Yeah,
Yeah.
and maybe went and asked the people at the beach, did you see her? Where did she go? And they went, don't know. So he's called the police. In the novel, it's a wee bit different. From what I can remember in the novel, they were all staying at a house together, and she doesn't come back to the house, and then he raises the alarm. But that's a completely different story. I haven't read the novel in years. But yeah, so and again, that kind of, as I say, Spielberg drip feeds into this movie here about people's backgrounds, where they're from, kind of telling you who they are and why they are who they are. And of course, he mentions to him about, Brody asks him, do you live here? And he's like, yeah, well, my parents are from here. I was studying away, and I've come back for the summer. And he says, you from here? And he says, New York City. So next thing is you hear the whistle going. And Brody asks Cassidy to run with him. And when we get there, he tells Cassidy to hold up. And you see Deputy Hendricks being sick. And when he looks down, there's an arm in the sand with crabs crawling over it. And John, I love this shot when Brody is like, oh God, and takes his glasses off, and he looks round out into the sea, and it's all kind of like blustery. So it is in grey, and there's seagulls flying about. It's almost like it's probably just in reality, they probably just had to get that shot and the weather turned. But in the context of the movie, it's almost kind of telling you like, yeah, bad things are coming.
It's gonna get a little bit worse from here. And even though this does seem pretty bad, and it just feels like the deputy has never seen anything like that, the way he collapses.
Yeah, and he's digging his keys into the sand on the water as well. Just to say, because 1 minute the water's just totally blue and nearly calm, and the next scene it's just all churning up. But yeah, you're right. The deputy Hendricks probably hasn't seen that, and then it cuts to the next scene where he is in the police station and he's drinking something to kind of probably help his stomach. And Polly comes in and she says, "You're up awful early." In other words, he must be doing the night shift. So she is like, he should be away home by now, but she's like, you're up awful early, chief in there."
I mean, she comes
Chief.
in like just ready to start her day. Like she doesn't even have any awareness about anything that's just happened. And I love that Roy Scheider still like doesn't really even give her anything and is just kind of ignoring her as she's going on and on about things.
Yeah, exactly. Now we got a bunch of calls about that karate school. It seems that the 9-year-olds from the school have been karateing to take picket fences. Chief Brody's office, medical inspector. No, I know every word in this movie, but she didn't give the medical inspector much time to answer the call. It's just like, Chief Brody's office, medical inspector. So he must have been just like, "Get me Chief Brody right now."
I
But
know, like, and she just like still like in her high energetic voice. And just before that, like one thing about the karate chopping, I like that I didn't know until watching the documentaries that they shot the kids actually karate chopping. And I'm
yeah,
like wondering, like, where were they going to use that? Like, were they going to do like a cutaway? And I'm just like, as far as a director goes, he probably just thought like, I'd rather have the footage than not, just in case, before, like when I edit it, like just in case there is a spot for it, because like, where would you use that?
yeah. Well, that's the thing as well, John. I think to myself, was that like pickup shots or because they couldn't film at sea, or
Mm,
was it in the original script and they came up with like, we don't need it because we hear people talking about it, we see the aftermath of it, we hear about it, then we see the aftermath of it. And what I really like here as well, and this carries over in Jaws 2 as well to a certain extent, is like it's just all small town problems.
mhm.
For the first like 15, 20 minutes of this movie, Brody's dealing with small town problems, which aren't overly important, but this is kind of trying to tell you this is like the everyday life of the police chief on this island, dealing with these small town problems, picket fences being chopped and stuff like that. And we'll get into it as the scenes go on because there's a few more. And that's what it's telling you. This is the extent of what this man usually has to deal with. And now all of a sudden he's dealing with something a lot more serious, a lot of a bigger threat, and then how these forces come together to kind of like suppress his initial kind of intuition to act. But he then takes the call from the medical examiner, and you see him typing it up on the typewriter. You know what I mean? Shark attack.
Yep.
Okay. And she mentions to him about he says, "I want a list of all the water activities going on at city town today." And she's like, "Right away." So he comes out and he asks Hendricks, "Hendricks, where do you keep the beach closed signs?" And he says, "Never had any." And he's like, "Right, okay." And then the next thing is you see somebody coming in to say, "Chief, there's somebody parked smack bang in the front of my store." I know what I mean. These are the things they're coming to him with, and
You constantly hear that. Even like when he's like later at the beach, they're still coming up to them like they just can't move past their little itty bitty problems. And this guy's thinking about a major issue.
exactly. But the next thing is you see him coming out of the police station, and he's like, "Just have him fill out the form. Just fill it out. Whatever it is, he needs to fill something out." And he's walking down through Amity Town, and you can hear the band playing in the background. And I love this because this is subtle things that you probably don't realize initially, and you probably overlook it in repeat viewings. But I when I watched the movie again earlier, the first hour again, it's like just watching out for certain things, and it's like you see the medical examiner coming out, you then see Harry Meadows come out of the Amity Gazette. So right away, they've been on the blower to each other, on the phone to each other, saying, "Here, listen, we have a shark problem here," and right away you know that the Gazette has been colluding with the Mirror. Stop, nip this in the bud. Don't let this go any further. Don't let this get out. But Brody is on a mission to go to the hardware store, and that's where he bumps into Bad Hat Harry with
Oh
his
yeah.
bicycle wheel, and he's saying about, "Look what the 9-year-old's done to my fence." And he points to Brody and he says, "Glasses? Yeah." So Brody didn't used to wear glasses.
Yeah, I guess not. I mean, his entire outfit that he wears, he just doesn't come off like very much like a very sternly, like manly man's cop, even though we know he is. Like he's wearing like that loose, like almost like windbreaker. He kind of comes off a little bit like I don't know, like more like a teacher than a police chief at the very beginning with the glasses and everything.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole point of the character. I know that I did read a story that Spielberg asked him to wear the glasses and he didn't want to. And Spielberg's, no, you need to wear them. So he wanted them to look like that. And I think that's the whole point of the character, mate, is because you don't want to believe this guy could overcome the odds and defeat the shark. That's the point of his character. So when he does it, it's an even bigger triumph. And that was one of the things that Spielberg talked about when they were casting the movie. Like, the studio was pushing for the big names and stars. And every time Spielberg was like, nope, don't want them. We want a no-namer, so we don't suspect that this guy's going to do it. So the glasses is all part of that. So, yeah, so he makes his way into the hardware store. And again, we see him making clumsily knocking over all the brushes when he's getting to get the supplies to make the signs.
Yeah, again, the human error of it all. Like, he's in such a rush, he's not paying attention, and he knocks that over. Of course.
Yeah, and he comes out with the signs, and then Hendrix pulls up on the Jeep, and he says to him about there's a bunch of Boy Scouts out in April Bay doing the mile swim for the merit badges. I couldn't call them in. There's no phones out there. So Brody says, "All right, get out of there. Take this stuff back to the office." And he says to him, get to work on the signs. Beach is closed, no swimming, ordered by the Amity PD. And he insults him. He says, let Polly do the printing. And you hear Hendrix saying, what's the matter with my printing? He's like, let Polly do the printing. And he speeds off, but the mirror comes out and he's shouting after Brody, and he pulls Hendrix. What do you got there? And so he fills the mirror in about the shark attack, and we got to close the beach.
Yep. And the mayor is like right away. And I love that actually how the mayor walks up and there's like this parade going on. Everything is going on. Like, that's what I mean about Steven Spielberg's like direction. He had it back then. It's a lot of extras to control to make that moment work and feel like it's actually really going on in this town.
Yeah, and it's like they're rehearsing, they're building up to the 4th of July. You can see the banners hanging up, it's a very busy town. They're gearing up for the summer season.
This is their time.
Yeah, and until I actually started thinking about doing this podcast, John, as well, thinking about how to present this podcast, do this podcast, and I didn't realize how much was going on. There's so much going on in this first 10 to 15 minutes.
It moves so quick.
And it moves so quick as well, John. There's not a wasted moment, but there's so much information being thrown at you. But it's not in a overwhelming kind of way. It's in a very kind of interesting type of way. And like you always said about Spielberg, John, he keeps it interesting. He keeps the camera moving. He keeps characters moving. And so it doesn't feel like you're being overloaded with information.
Yeah, exactly. And like Ben, because they all feel so real. Like, look what, like, you start paying attention like to what the mayor's wearing. He's got these ridiculous jackets on all the time. But because it's like they took over this town, this is a real town. Like, it feels like a real small town, and it feels like a day in June. Like the wind's kind of blowing around a little bit because they're so close to the water. And like, the mayor's hair is blowing around. All that kind of stuff just makes it feel like this could really happen.
Yeah, exactly. This town, even though it was filmed on location, but like you say, with orchestrating the extras and those characters all coming out together, he's really brought Amity Town or Amity Island to life here. With them opening scenes, and then it cuts to he's at it's the Chappaquiddick Ferry actually, but it's called Amity on Time, and you see him kind of looking over.
You ever heard of Chappaquiddick before this?
Well, not before Jaws, but I'm aware of the Chappaquiddick. Yes.
Like what happened with Ted Kennedy and everything.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
There's a movie. I just have to let you know. I mean, this is being the movie fan that I'm. The movie Chappaquiddick that came out, like, I want to say now probably like 10 years. Really good movie. Watch it once.
Yeah. I should give it a watch. I'm aware of the story. Yeah. I'm very aware of it. As a matter of fact, in Jaws 2, at the start, when Brody's in his Jeep, he goes over the bridge in which that happened.
Oh, well, that's very interesting. See, I mean, this is something I kind of just discovered a little bit late. Like, when the Chappaquiddick movie was coming out, I didn't really know the story, and then I heard it, and I was like, isn't the Chappaquiddick Ferry in Jaws? like it all kind of came like a full circle moment for me.
Yeah, and they're certain that's the Chappaquiddick Ferry. They call it the Chappie Ferry, and they're certain.
Like when I was watching that documentaries, I think the guy running the actual ferry, they get him in there. They were saying like, they keep that's his real job because all these people kind of like lived in this town for real.
Yeah, that's right. And he's called Charlie, and I think that's the same guy that tries to catch the shark later.
Oh yeah,
on the pier.
Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting. Like, again, these like little small characters. If you get real people, they feel like real people.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the same. Well, I would assume it'd be the same actor. I must double check, but it must be the same character because it's like, so Brody's standing there and he sees the estuary victim. He sees the wee red boat and he sees the Boy Scouts swimming, and he says, "Charlie, take me over to those kids." But once he gets on the ferry, you see the car pull up, and the kind of like, do you notice how it's kind of shot, John? Where like Brody's on the left hand side of the camera, and then once they all get out of the car, they all kind of surround him,
And
and he's kind of like looking like, "What's
well,
going on here?"
I actually noticed this like right before for the first time. I actually noticed how the mayor walks up and grabs him, like kind of like reaches under his arm and like pokes him a little bit. I'm like, I'd kind of get a little annoyed. Like, I personally, I wouldn't want to be touched like that, like, and then getting surrounded like that. Like, I mean, all right, that's kind of a weird situation.
Yeah, what did I write down? What did they actually say here? I wrote down, yeah, Vonda's cronies surround Brody. So they do. Yeah, they're kind of like ganging up on him. Do you know what I mean? As if, Brody, you don't understand. This is not how we do things. You got to understand, this is how we do it. You must be wrong. Even though the medical examiner's there and has already told him this is a shark attack. And
Yeah,
then,
that really pissed me off. That felt like the most political thing anyway. Like he got bullied into changing his opinion.
and he turns around and he says, what do you think done that to that girl? And I think it's the mayor turns around and says, boat propeller. And then the medical examiner's like pushing his glasses up, even though he was a real medical examiner, lived on that island. So, I mean, I think for the small part he has, he hasn't got a big speech or anything like that, but I think he's realistic enough, and he pushes the glasses up because he's lying, and he's like, I think possibly, yeah, a boating accident. And then Brody's like, a boating accident? That's not what you told me over the phone. And he's like, well, we'll have to amend our reports, won't we?
Yeah, of course. Now we do, right?
Yeah, and the mirror then brings Brody to the foreground. I love how Spielberg does that. How he brings the audience into the conversation by Damon's coming forward, and the other
we feel
guys
like
are
the
in
third
background.
person in them as they're talking. Like we feel like we're in the center.
Yeah, and it probably feels more personable to Brody as well, because now he's not surrounded by people. He's just saying to them like, look, you yell Barracuda, people say, well, you yell shark, we're gonna have a panic on the 4th of July. You know? And another thing I love about this scene as well, John, do you notice it from when Brody enters the ferry till the mayor says we're going to have a panic on the 4th of July? It's all one shot.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's an amazing shot. And what a location to do that. Like the barge with the car moving along on it, like and leaving it on there. And the fact that they're moving and they're all stuck on here, it almost feels like a mob kind of thing. Even though like these are the political people, it feels like they're ganging up on him to change his mind because we have to do this. And I get their desperation, but how do you orchestrate that in your mind? You're just being very hopeful that nothing goes wrong from here.
Yeah. Well, like you say, there is mob undercurrents in the novel that, the mayor's kind of like under pressure from the mob to keep the beaches open because they have invested interest in Amity Island and making money. And if they close the beaches, then they're not going to make their money. So there's that angle there, which they cut completely out of the movie. I don't believe in the movie that's what's happening in the background. I just think it's more to do with survival of the town, and they just want to sweep it under the blanket or under the rug and think that nothing's going to come of this. It was a one-off. Probably that girl was traveling, isn't from Amity. Nobody's going to miss her. Who cares? Their attitude is, who cares? As cold as that sounds, And there was a deleted scene where just when the mayor turns out and says, okay, you can take us back now. And you hear Charlie going, fine. There was a deleted scene where Brody actually does lose his patience a wee bit. And he turns around and he says, okay, I can't do my job in a vacuum. Maybe you should have hired Hendricks instead of me. He says something along the lines of he's one of your town folk or something like that. And Larry Vaughn, the mayor, says to him, Martin, we hired the right person, trying to keep him at ease as if, you are the right guy for the job.
Yeah, he probably knows that Hendricks is like too much of a pushover with no backbone. Like, I need somebody at least who can do the job.
Yeah, well, there's that. And maybe he needs somebody that doesn't know the island at all. And that benefits him. That benefits him even more too.
That's a good point. Very good point.
Because he can do an awful lot that Brody doesn't understand. Now, I don't know what that may be, but I just think he's not used to the look, and maybe he knows he'll never be accepted.
That's true too. They'll always take his side. Like no matter what he says, the mayor will still be a bigger power than him, no matter what happens. And they obviously show that once they get to the second one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we discussed that. Did we discuss that about the second one? We think Hendricks is just like a stopgap.
Yeah, exactly. That's all he is. He's the guy they can always put there because he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So then we cut to the next beach scene, which is basically the first day beach scene, and it's a Sunday, and so Brody's a day off. He's relaxing at the beach. I always love I always love shaders like lazy dress wear in this movie when you see him in it, just those cut off kind of trousers and a black t-shirt. I think I'm getting that age, John.
I mean, that's always how I would dress if I went to the beach, was in a t-shirt, but that's because the sun was trying to murder me. So I related very much to his outfit.
Yeah, wear a white t-shirt, don't wear a black one.
Oh
Uh,
God, no! I mean, he's insane for that.
yeah, he loves the sun as it does our Roy. But yeah, and we see it's quite busy for a Sunday, and I had to take a few notes here just to get it in context. You know what I mean? We see them on the beach. We see an overweight woman going into the water, and then we see Alex Kintner wearing red shorts emerge from the water, and he asks his mum, you know, can he go out in the water, stay out in the water a wee bit longer? And she says, Alex Kintner, your fingers are beginning to prune. And he says, look, will it just let me go out a wee bit longer? And she says, 10 more minutes. Now, I bet she wishes she hadn't given him that 10 minutes.
No.
Yeah, which is one of those things. And you hear in the background, that's what I'm talking about, overlapping dialogue. You hear in the background Alan Brody asking some of the town folk, when do I get to become an islander? And you hear, which we learn to be a woman called Mrs. Taft, who is the original Karen, I may add. She says, Ellen, never, never. You're not born here. You're not an islander, right? So right away, they're telling you these people will never be accepted on Amity Island.
Yeah, they're too close knit. You're an outsider, regardless of what your position and stature is here now. You won't be one of us. Which, yeah, she is the original Karen. Alex's mom in this movie. I just want to address a different era. Not the most beautiful looking woman in the world, but I'm always trying to figure out her age. Like, is she 30 and it was just a different time, or is she like 49 years old?
I would say about, first of all, I want to say about Mrs. Taft. I want to say that she has become a cult figure in the Jaws community over the last few years. I've noticed people love Mrs. Taft. And that's one great thing about this movie is when you cast locals, they've got great character about them. They're just normal, everyday people that have been cast in a movie. They can say a few lines, but you remember them because they're not your conventional actor or actress. And I've seen somebody had a portrait of Mrs. Taft once in her yellow polo neck, you know, and her like Columbo jacket and her big glasses. And I was like, I want that portrait. I love it. It's class. I'd hang that in my house. Because people go, who the hell's that? Mrs. Taft from Jaws. Who? The original Karen. But look, Mrs. Kintner, that's another one I've heard over the years of people have been sorry, John, very cruel about
yeah, it's mean. It's a little bit, it's a cruel joke, but I still think it's a little funny.
This is what I think about Mrs. Kintner. I agree about, you know, she looks a bit old to be a mum, but what I actually is what I believe, and I could maybe explain this later, but I'll say it now so don't forget. As the movie goes on, we probably find out that Mrs. Kintner is a widow. You know, I think we've talked about movies before. Some people look in the 70s look older than what their actual age was. It was a different time. I would put an age range. I don't know what age Lee Ferrero was when she made Jaws, possibly late 30s, early 40s. But as a character, she could be between late 30s and maybe at the oldest 45, 46. Now, say Alex is 10. Now, she might have had him in her mid 30s. Now, that was kind of old in the 70s to have kids, but it wasn't out of the realm of possibility. And I like to think that it was even more of a tragedy that Alex was taken to her in that way because of her age. Because she was in her mid 40s, the chances of her having any more kids is slim. Secondly, it's her only child. And thirdly, she doesn't have a husband. She's a widow. So all those elements to me make this character even more tragic.
Yeah, you feel horrible for her as a person. Like, you know, obviously she becomes like the butt of a joke just because of her looks. But as far as like everything she goes through, like it breaks my heart when they cut back to her, like while everyone's running towards the water and she's just like looking around. I'm like, she doesn't even like how she doesn't know yet. It's the calm before the storm, literally.
Yeah, of course. Before we get to that, John, of course, we see the man throwing a stick in the water and the big black Labrador Pipit running into the water and chasing the stick. And then Alex enters the water, and this is what I love about it. You mentioned it, actually. I think it was in our Spielberg podcast where you talked about how he edits this scene, the wipe off of what he's looking at. And, you know, this whole scene here is just about building tension, Brody's paranoia, our paranoia as an audience member, us knowing that there's a shark out there, that these people are in the water, and which one is it going to get? You see the woman floating in the water, the overweight woman. You see the dogs running in and out. At one stage, you hear a woman screaming, and Brody kind of looks, and it's her boyfriend fooling about with her. Alex is there, and then you see like a grey shape going through the water, and you see Brody watching. He sits forward as if, is that a shark? And you see Bad Hat Harry coming out of the water with his face like that. But in between this, you have the small town problems again. You have Mrs. Taft's husband, I assume that's who it is, over talking about, hey, Martin, I want to do a red zone for me. I got these cats parking in front of the yard. And Brody's not even listening to him.
No, not at all. And this guy's just rambling on like this is the biggest deal in his freaking life. Meanwhile, Chief Brody, like, he can't even relax on Sunday because he's got to have these guys walking up to him. And meanwhile, he's looking at the water, and he's laser focused on it.
Yeah, and this guy's a complete dork, because he's sitting talking to Brody in his face, and Brody's not even paying attention, and he's that much of a dork that he doesn't realize Brody's not even paying attention to him. It's just like, here, Marty, it's almost like, everybody's there to serve the town folk. It's like, yeah, Martin, you need to call them by first name and all. Can you do this for me? Oh, thanks very much. I know you can do it. Bye.
Yeah, whatever you can get out of him. I'll be friendly enough, like act like we're buddies, but I don't really care. I just need something from him.
Yeah, exactly. And as I say, Bad Hat Harry then comes up to him.
I hate Harry. I really do. This guy, like the way he comes up with and you got some set of balls coming up and saying that, looking like the way you do right now.
He's got some set of tits on him too.
Yeah, I know. And you got something to make fun. We know about you, Chief. You don't go in at the water at all, do you?
Yeah.
Nice hat, Harry.
Yeah. And Brody puts him in his place. He's just like, he moves the seating all over. He's like, it's some bad hat, Harry. And he's just seating all over. And even Harry knows what he's getting. He's insulted. He's like, he goes off. And in between this, of course, we then see that Michael Brody has said to Sean, do you want to go in the water? All the other kids are going in the water, and us as an audience member now, we're really like, oh God, something bad's going to happen here. Alan's over giving Brody a massage, loosen up, everything's going to be all right. And the kids start squealing in the water and splashing each other, and you just know what that's going to attract. And I think that's what attracts the shark in. But then we see the sad moment of the stick floating in the water. No Pippet, no dog, completely gone, and his owner's shouting, Pippet, come on, Pippet. But before this, John, something I want to point out, talking about filmmaking. Do you notice that Spielberg's use of yellow in this film? It's predominantly in this scene here. You had the billboard with the yellow around it as well, right? But even the Brody's house has a lot of yellow through it. But on the beach scene here, so we have the yellow lilo, we have the fella that's throwing the stick to Pippet is wearing a yellow t-shirt, and Mrs. Kintner's wearing a yellow hat.
And what color is the floating thing? Isn't that yellow as well? The floaty?
The lilo. It's called a lilo.
Oh, you guys call that a lilo?
Yeah, what do you call it? A raft?
Raft, floating. I just call it a floating raft.
Inflatable raft?
Inflatable raft, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. We call them lilos. Tried to sleep on one of them once, and
oh my God.
Really, back when I was a kid in Cyprus one time on holiday, and it was really hot, and you just pretty much stuck it. You were peeling your skin off it.
Yeah,
you were trying to move during the night.
You're supposed to keep that mostly in the water.
It was very uncomfortable, I have to say.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it was terrible. But so then we cut to underwater, and we hear the Jaws theme, and we see the shark kind of swimming around, and you're wondering who is it going to go for, and of course it's going to go straight for the one that's probably splashing the most, which is Alex on his raft. You could argue he looks a bit like a seal as well. And what do you think about this attack, John?
This one's gruesome. The amount of blood you see and him getting, this is the one where it always sticks out in my head of him going under and then thrown up in the air and then back under again. It's very violent. This really illustrates the strength of the shark. Like, it just causes so much damage, and obviously he could see it right away, Roy Scheider.
Yep, it is horrific because you have that initial kind of the shark coming up underneath, and you have that initial kind of I think it's you see him bouncing up, but there's no blood yet, and then it cuts to the beach, and I love that line where somebody says, "Did you see that?" And then when it cuts back, you see him come up, and this time there's just a spurt of blood. And when it cuts to under the water, and you see him struggling, he gurgles. He almost makes a sound like he's gurgling. I'm dead. Hear the noise he makes? He's like, I'm dead. That's what it sounds like to me. He's probably not saying that. And you just see him being pulled down. You hear that last kind of gurgle. And that's when on Brody, all his fears have been confirmed. His worst nightmares come true. And that we have that famous dolly zoom straight into Roy Scheider's face. And that kind of, if it wasn't enough with the music and your nerves, and then we seeing that child get killed like that, that zoom makes your stomach just go whoop, do somersaults.
Oh yeah, and that's just incredible filmmaking right there. But then yeah, and then he's got to run towards it, and this is great as well, where he's going towards, and he's still scared of the water, like other people like running in, but he won't. He'll just get to the edge, and he's still trying to like direct traffic. But this is where he's like all like you said, all his fears just came true, and then also his fear of the water. He doesn't like know. He's like so conflicted and confused in this one moment.
Well, the thing is, his instinct is to protect, right, and get people out. And he runs towards the water, but as soon as his feet touch the water, he stops dead in his tracks, as you say. So it's just an instinct thing for him, but it won't let him go any further because of the fear he has for the water. But you're right, everybody else is pulling everybody out of the water, and Mrs. Kintner is like the last person to realize. And you're right, it's horrific when she gets up and kind of scouts down the water, the edge of the water. You shout Alex, Alex, and then you just see that yellow Lilo or yellow inflatable raft, no longer inflatable. They kind of split in two.
Won't inflate again.
It won't inflate again. And it's kind of, you can see the blood kind of like just washing up onto the beach.
Yeah, which Steven Spielberg said that, like, you know, he wanted the only red to be in the movie. Like, there's still some other hints of red, but like the blood of the film to be in there.
Well, the child, Alex Kintner, he was that was an instruction by Spielberg, and that kid turned up with red trunks on, and they went, "You're not allowed to wear red," and they went, "Have I got a spare pair of shorts for him?" And they went, "No." So I went, "All right, go ahead, shoot, or else it wouldn't have been red." So that was a mistake.
Yeah, and those are some bright red trunks he had on. Yeah, well, can't always get it right, I guess. And I think I saw also that they had a hard time, like they were gonna let him do it by himself, like as far as the acting, like getting thrown up in the air, but he couldn't do it, so they actually had to like have like a stunt man underneath him throw him around.
Yeah, there was divers and things like that were underneath. They were kind of like jerking them and stuff like that and throwing them up and whatever. But the thing was, they had like this pump under the water which blew the blood up as if it was spurting. And the first time they done it, I think it must have been like an air bubble in or something that spurted too much. So, but the thing was that you couldn't just do a shot right away. You had to wait and clear the water out so all the blood disappeared. You know what I mean? And then rig it all up again and put the fake blood in. So it took several hours to reset up the shot again. So that was the problem. You know, it wasn't like you try to do it once and it didn't work, and you have to wait hours to do it again. But as I say, there's another internet myth and rumor of footage of like a more gruesome death for Alex Kintner. And to be honest, that's just it's not true. That's not the way it was filmed was the way it was to be intended. Now they did use the mechanical shark. So they did come up behind him. You see the fins kind of roll. That is the mechanical shark. It's just that the camera's low. You can't see it. And there was like islanders who were filming the mechanical shark coming up and biting a raft, okay, and it was filmed from the side, so they have like behind the scenes footage of that, and people actually think that was supposed to be in the movie. It wasn't. It was like amateur footage of islanders just filming the mechanical shark in action, and they done several shots of it just coming up and clamping down on the raft, and eventually on the last take they got it. If you it's actually on that, I think the shark is still working. You see it coming up and it turns. And then you see it in the movie. If you watch the movie, you can see the fins just turn. You know, that's the mechanical shark coming up, biting and turning. So that's another myth that I've seen online, that the scene was supposed to be more horrific and more gruesome, and they had to cut it out because it was too gruesome. That's not true. Some of this footage wasn't even footage from the film. Or if it wasn't the film, it was actually filmed by the actual filmmakers from a different angle, and that was just amateur footage at the time. But then we go to the next scene, of course. We see the reward sign up, you know, $3,000 to the man or men who catch and killed the shark or killed Alex Kintner on the beach on June 29th. Yeah, and you see them walking up the hallway, like, and Harry Meadows, the newspaper reporter, saying, you know, we're going to bury the story as deep as we can. We're going to run at the back along with the grocery ads.
But you're still printing the story, but it's like you're really willing to like hide a kid's death because you can't let the town get hit that bad. Like that, your town has a bad economy then.
Yeah, but the whole thing is that they're all in denial. There's people at that meeting who were on the beach that literally seen a child disappear on a bitten raft with blood. And you hear Mrs. Taft saying, "We don't even know there's a shark around here. Oh, I can't argue with you. I can't talk to you." She was there. And then you have like Brody saying, "Well, you know, I'm responsible for public safety." And you see the mayor kind of reluctantly saying, "We'll go out there tomorrow and make sure nobody gets hurt." As you know, with a kind of scorn on his face, as if, you know, it's like he's reluctantly saying it to try and acknowledge that they have a problem, you know.
Yeah, he does not want to admit that there's a major problem. And I get it. Like their finances all wrapped up in this, but like, come on, you see what's going on. And you got the reward out there to find it. So, you're like half in, half out at this point.
Well, Mrs. Kintner's putting the reward up because when they go in and they sit down and you hear I think it's the mayor says any special questions, and then you hear the guy at the end going, "Is that $3,000 bounty on the shark and cash or check?" And they all start laughing. The Mrs. Taft's like, "I don't think that's funny. I don't think that's funny at all. I'm sorry." And you hear that the mayor says, "That's private business between you fishermen and Mrs. Kintner," and he's like, let me tell you what we're planning so far. So they're having the meeting with the townsfolk. I imagine all those townsfolk, and they're like, they own restaurants, they own bars, they own shops, they own hotels. I like to think Mrs. Taft owns a hotel. And so Brody's just setting out what their plans is. And of course, the mayor is that slimy. He can't tell them. He sets Brody up to be the fall guy. He's like, "Chief Brody, go get up there and tell them." And so Brody's like, "I just want to tell you what we're planning so far." And somebody says, "What about the beaches, Chief?" And he ignores it. And he says, "We're going to use shark spotters on the beach." And then eventually he's pressed by Mrs. Taft, "Are you going to close the beaches?" And he's like, "Yes, we are." And then they're all up in arms about that. And the mayor sees how much up in arms they are. And he's like, "Only 24 hours. And Brody's like, "I didn't agree to that." And you hear somebody shouting, 24 hours is like 3 weeks.
I know, like even that's too long. Like 1 minute was already going to be too long. Like the beaches have to stay open while you do this. It's like, who wants to go to the beach if there's a shark attack? But they're trying to bury that story.
They don't see it like that. They don't care. And look, I can understand from the point of view, if I know a lot of people are sitting and they're saying, "No, I can't believe this about why do these people want the beaches open? There's a shark, a child has been killed." And I agree, that's bad. You got to sort that problem out. But at the same time, well, I think what people don't understand who aren't from a wee island like that, and I think it's realistic to real life, is that, these wee islands here, they make all their money in summer season. Because they get no income during the winter, and that money has to sustain them till the next summer. So if they get no money in the summer season, they're going to starve for the rest of the year.
Quinn even says it. You're going to be on welfare for the winter.
Exactly. So there is a real fear there. It's not, the reaction may be irrational, but it's not an irrational fear that they have, that they might not lose out on business. They won't be able to feed themselves, So, but look, the right thing to do is deal with the shark problem. And of course, we are, as you mentioned them there, introduced to Captain Quint in this scene. Another internet myth that I wanted to dispel: his name is not Sam. He is just called Quint. Because in the novel, he's specifically called Quint. And when Brody and Hooper look him up in the telephone pages to call him about the shark, the name on the telephone pages is Quint. And they make a point of saying, "Oh, it's just Quint." Okay, so his name's not Sam. For anybody out there who thinks his name is Sam Quint, it is not. It is Quint.
And I was trying to think of for the longest time. I'm like, what is Quint's first name? I heard the myth, but I'm like, they make sure to tell you Martin Brody, Matt Hooper, but they never let you know. So that's intentional. I agree with you.
Yeah, it's intentional. You know what I mean? Like we could sit here, and it's only a movie at the end of the day, but we can sit here and think, well, everybody has a first name, but according to the source material, his name's Quint. In the movie, even at the end when the end credits are rolling, it says Quint, played by Robert Shaw, but also says Martin Brody and Matt Hooper, and they're certain it does. Maybe it just says Brody, Hooper, Quint. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm wrong on that, John. I could be wrong. But look, as you say, we hear Martin and Matt Hooper referenced throughout the movie. We don't hear a first name for Quint anywhere, and I can say the source material is the novel, and he doesn't have a first name in that either. So what an entrance for a movie character, scraping his fingernails down the blackboard after he's drawn a shark on the blackboard in chalk.
Yeah, I was trying to watch this time, like see if when he filed in, but he must have came in when they had the camera on Martin and the mayor and everything like that.
Yeah, but everybody was kind of like up in arms and stuff. He snuck in with his wee buddy, right? And he's like drew a shark on the blackboard of it eating a young boy. And I've seen people say, like, why do you do that for? And it's like, I'm just like, because it's Quint. He's all about dramatic effect, and he's scraping his nails down the blackboard. Anyway, so he is showing how hard he is by scraping his fingernails down the blackboard, and everybody's kind of like, it's grinding on them. And I love how you see Mrs. Taft jumped up and turned and says like, "Oh my God, what is that?" Oh, so she is.
Well, like you said, original Karen. She's just offended by everything.
Yeah, I know. See the face on her when she turns around.
Yeah, I know, with her freaking glasses.
Big glasses and the hair, 70s hair. But I love her. She's class. So yeah, so Quint, this is the first of his amazing speeches in this movie. And he's kind of like, y'all know me. No, I earn a living. I'll catch this bird for you. Ain't gonna be easy.
Bad fish. Not like going down the pond chasing bluegills or tommy cats.
But it's great as well how he kind of foreshadows his own death.
Oh,
He says
yeah.
about, a little shaking, a little tenderizing. Down you go.
Down you go. I love that delivery of "down you go," like the way it
Down you
just
go.
rolls off his tongue. Like amazing voice work from him, because when it's weird to watch him speak in that outfit with his regular voice, his regular accent, and it's just like
Mhm.
it's incredible acting.
His British accent is kind of he's very kind
It's
of,
very formal too.
yes, very politely spoken as well. And then he's doing this he's trying to do like a New England East Coast accent. But I remember reading that review Roy Shader, and it says, then what accent was Robert Shaw doing? He went, I don't know what the hell that was.
It definitely sounds unique and original to him. So, you know what I always like chalked it up to is like something it's developed for a guy like that who's kind of, he lives in this town, but he's kind of an outsider, and he's making his own alcohol, so he's probably a drunk too, and his voice kind of just ended up like that.
Yeah, it's great. It works. Nobody cares. I mean, unless maybe you're from there, you may go to yourself, that sounds a bit odd. What's he doing there? But look, I've heard people describe him online that he was doing an Irish accent. And I'm like, that's not an Irish accent. But he did live in Ireland at that time. So I don't know. I think that he did try and imitate people. He did. There is a train of thought. There was a guy who worked on a movie called Lynn Murphy, who was from the island. And apparently Robert Shaw based part of Quint on his characteristic. And then there's a guy that comes into the movie later on, Ben Gardner. He's played by a guy called Craig Kingsbury. He actually lived on the island. And Shaw hung about with him for a while and drank with him and stuff. And there's also the thought that he also is Quint partly on his character. And you'll see Craig Kingsbury has the mutton chops and the moustache, just like Robert Shaw does. So as I say, but no, it's so good. I mean, he's perfect in this film. And as you said, he talks about as well, you'll be on welfare the whole winter. But he makes it clear, don't want no volunteers, don't want no mates. There's too many captains on this island. I love that line as well, John, where he turns out and he says about, I'm at risk of my neck for $3,000. He says, he says, I'll find him for 3, but I'll catch him and kill him for 10.
Yep.
I've been thinking about this recently. It's like, is it 10 on top of the 3, or is it 10 all in?
I think 10 all in. That's how I always thought.
Yeah.
He's like, I'll find him for 3. Like essentially, like I'll point him out to you where he is, but I'm not catching and killing him unless you jump that 10 grand.
But you love how he just picks people out. I love he folds up and he says, I'm not risking my neck for $3,000, Chief. Picks him out. Nick, he says, I'll find him for 3, but I'll catch him and kill him for 10. All right. As I say, he says to them, you got to make a remains. But when he gets up, he actually says he knows, like, he spooked the whole congregation. He's an outsider, you see. Quint is an outsider, just like Brody's an outsider.
Mhm.
Okay. He's the type of guy that the Islanders don't want to be associated with. They don't want to be around. And I love when he stands and he says, Mr. Mayor, and he just goes, Chief, ladies and gentlemen, and then turns and walks out. You see him blowing his fingernails, but his wee mate is with him, his wee mate's behind him as he leaves the town hall.
His one loyalist.
Yeah, he becomes less loyal later on. There's a deleted scene about that. We'll go into that in the next episode. Reminded me. But yeah, we'll have a quick scene then. It's dusk and they're putting the beach closed signs into the beach. So they are. I just love that wee snippet of just them showing you putting the beach closed signs in, and and it's really windy and stuff, and it's getting to become nighttime. And then it cuts to Brody reading the shark books. And Alan comes in and scares him. She says to him, hands him a drink and says, "Look, enough, you won't be able to sleep tonight." And he's like, you know how old sharks are. And do you want to get drunk and fool around? And he's like, oh, yeah. And then she's like, Mikey really loves his present. And I hate the way she says that. And he's like, and you see Brody's landing. You see him about to look at the shark book again. He just can't put them down. And he's like, where is he? And she says, sitting in it. And that's when he's like, gets up, Michael, get out of the boat. She obviously thinks that they're going to be safe because they're in a boat. And he's like, no, 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 get them out of the boat. Now, I'm more concerned, to be honest with you, the fact that two small children are sitting at the end of a dock by themselves.
Yeah, both their parents are inside. They're about to drink and fool around, and meanwhile the kids are outside in a boat in the water. Like I'd be worried about them just drowning on their own because they're young.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's just artistic license, or is that really just a sign of the times?
I mean, they used to let kids, like from what I understand, and this is like 10 years before my parents. Like, I guess my dad was probably around their age at that time, but it was a lot more of like the parents allowing them to do what the hell they wanted back then. And I guess it kind of worked out.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I say, she has one of the books in her hands, calms Brody down, and he's like, "Look, I just want them to read the regulations. A typical cop. I just wanted to read the boating regulations, the rules, before they go out on their own." And she's flipping through the book and sees this very famous painting of a great white shark smashing through the hull of a small boat, and then she turns around, closes it, and shouts, "Michael, did you hear your father? Get out of the water now, now!" And you see Brody kind of looking as if, what changed? Well, all of a sudden
Yeah.
you changed your way. But that's what you said, John. That's the realism of this family.
Exactly. Like they feel like a real authentic family. And of course, like she's like, because it's, she's just kind of imagining like what a great white shark is. Like that's probably not as bad. But then when she sees it, she's like, oh, that could kill my kid in a second. She should have been scared already. But I think for some reason, seeing it like that, like made it more realistic for her.
Yeah, she probably just lack of understanding. Obviously, like we're talking in fantasy movie here, super shark, attacking boats, sinking boats, and things like that. She is like a lot of people thinks, oh, well, they're in a boat, should be fine. Shark will be able to get them. But when she sees that picture, she thinks, oh, well, what if it does attack the boat? As the movie goes on, we hear about attacks on boats and things like that, which sharks have been known to attack boats. But in this movie, it's a wee bit exaggerated, some of the attacks on the boats. But they have been known that the knocking the boats and things like that. So then we cut a night scene, and we see it's Charlie and Dan Herter. They're actually rowing towards a dock, and it cuts to them on the dock, and they pull out this big whack of meat. And you hear one of I think it's Charlie, I think, saying, we better catch something. This is my wife's holiday roast. And he's putting the hook into it. And the other one says, don't worry about it. $3,000 buys an awful lot of roast.
I was thinking about it as somebody who works with meat, looking at that roast. I'm like, that's about $100 piece of meat in today's economy. So he better hope he catches something because his wife is gonna be fucking pissed.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes it kind of funny. Like it's kind of, could you imagine them two guys sitting there having a beer, going, "Know what it is? There's a shark hunt tomorrow. $3,000. We'll get the drop on them." Right?
It feels like that kind of thing. Like, let's sneak out like tonight when our wives are sleeping.
Yeah, we'll catch it tonight and pretend we've caught it tomorrow, and we'll collect the 3,000. And he's going, "Well, we've no bait." And he's like, "I've got a big whack of roast in there." Or his mate's going, "Use your roast." And he's going, "No, my wife will kill me." And he's like, "We'll catch the shark. She'll be happy. We'll have $3,000. What are you worried about?" And he talks him into it, and it's like, right, okay. But you hear them on the boat going like, don't worry about it. Chief lives on the other side of the island. So there's slipperly trying to catch the shark before the hunt the next day, because you even hear him when he goes to throw it in the water. He's like, "Come and get it." He throws it out onto the water, and you hear him like, the tide's taking it right out. And the other guy says, "Can't we go home?" So he's kind of thinking, look, we're gonna hook it and come back maybe early in the morning, and we'll have caught something. But yeah, so that's brilliant. Like when you that's what I love about these type of movies, John. Not the fact that it's my favorite movie, but like you're not spoon fed at everything. There was something I just dreamt up in my head in 2 seconds there. Which could you imagine them as just sitting in the house having a beer, talking about the shark, and thinking we'll go try and catch it ourselves tomorrow, and going, well, why would we wait until tomorrow? Just go now. You know what I mean?
Doesn't make much sense, but yeah, it does make sense when you think about what these guys. That's the characteristics of these little small characters that we see.
Yeah, and as I said, I think Charlie Dan Herter is another character. I think he's one of the select men. I'm near certain he's one of the select men. I can't remember, but Charlie is the guy that was controlling the ferry. Well, it's the same name. I assume it's the same guy. So then it cuts to Brody flicking through the shark books, and I love how this is done. This is probably part of my fascination with sharks. I have a shark book collection, and I think that back in the day before YouTube and where you can get access to anything, having a shark book and be able to just flick through it and read the stories about shark attacks and things like that, was very fascinating to me. And that's basically what Brody's doing here. And I love how it transitions from showing you like massive sharks, showing you their teeth, their jaws, their moves, and then it transitions into, for example, shark attacks, sharks biting things, sharks eating things, then humans that have been attacked.
Yeah, exactly. It shows you every single element of like what a shark could do. Like first you learn about the anatomy and then actually the damage that they could do.
Yeah, and of course that's feeding into our fear, our paranoia, and our imaginations, because the fact that we don't really see what's happening below the surface, we've seen still photographs of real stuff in a book, so that's what's going on in our minds as the movie's going on as well.
Yep.
Yeah, and then of course we cut to the dock, and the shark starts pulling on the tire. So he does, pulling it through the water. The chain goes and then pulls the dock off, and it's dragging Charlie through the water as well. What do you think about this scene?
I love this scene. I love the dock turning back around. Like we still haven't seen the shark, but the shark is so freaking strong that it pulled the dock off, and now when the dock turns around, it's literally the shark pulling him. And like, is Charlie gonna get back in time? Is he gonna get back to the dock? Even though the shark is so strong, it's pulling the dock towards him, and Charlie's just got to swim on his own and get back. It's great tension-filled scene.
Yeah, and as I said, I was going to be fawning over John Williams' score here. What a
Oh
wonderful
yeah.
piece of score, which starts from when Brody's going through the book, right? And then all of a sudden, once you just see the tip of the fin go through the water, and you hear the bum 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 bum, and it starts getting faster and faster. You see the chain going, and then they're whistling. They realize, they're like, "Hey, something's got it," and they're like, "Go, go, go, go!" And it just takes it off. You're right. That the whole idea of him being dragged out to sea, and all you see is the pier, all you see is the dock, and then as it turns and the music changes and gets louder and it's coming for him. I love the when it just turns and you hear that and you hear him going, "Swim, Charlie, swim." Now, originally it was supposed to get Charlie and bite his leg off.
I like that he gets away.
Yes, I like it too. The filmmakers decided that, you know what, we have a leg later on, so we don't need a leg here. We'll just let Charlie escape. And I love how when he gets up onto the dock and he's panting, and you see that the music just kind of slowly fades out, and the dock kind of rolls up onto the sand beside him, and you hear him going, "Can we go home now?"
Yeah, that'd be it for me for that day too. It's time to go.
Yeah, it was enough. And then obviously it cuts to the next scene, and you hear Hendrix has got the lowdown. Hendrix knows what's been happening. He's kind of like, he's saying to him, "Then Dan Harder and Charlie were trying to catch their breath, figuring out how to tell Charlie's wife what happened to her freezer full of meat." And then Brody says to Mrs. Toffley, he's like, "That's not funny. That's not funny at all." But I love that another funny line where he's like, he changes the subject. He's like, "Mrs. Kintner must have put her ad in Field and Stream," and he's like, "It's more like the National Enquirer." And then you
Funny
see,
stuff.
what's that?
Funny stuff. I like that. Like little bits of comedy in here.
Yeah, because there's like Field and Stream. What's that, like a nature magazine? But he's kind of like, because they're all the fishermen. But or sorry, it must be a fishing magazine. But then he's like, "No, National Enquirer," because they all look like a bunch of spacers, But then next week you see Hooper pulling up, and he gets off onto the dock, and he meets Ben Gardner, and he's like, "Hello," and Ben Gardner's like, "Hello back, young sailor. How are you?" And he says, "I hope you're not going out with those nuts, are you?"
Yeah, that's a great introduction to Hooper. Like obviously, this is the first time you see Richard Dreyfuss.
Yeah.
Richard Dreyfuss, like it always amazes me to see him like this, like young, like a full head of hair, not turned white yet. The young Richard Dreyfuss, even like he looks younger than he does a couple years later in Close Encounters, like wearing the hat. Just looks like a regular guy.
Yeah, Richard Dreyfuss is like I've heard him called like the original hipster, and I've also heard people say, you don't mix denim.
Glasses, yeah.
Yeah, when you don't mix denim, you don't wear denim jeans and wear a denim jacket. But he pulls it off perfectly in this movie, and I do know that they were going to after different actors for Jaws. For Hooper in Jaws. And it was George Lucas. Funny enough, we were talking on a Spielberg podcast about him being a better businessman. He actually suggested to Spielberg, why don't you cast Ricky Dreyfuss, because he was in American Graffiti, and they offered it to Richard Dreyfuss, and Richard Dreyfuss told him about the movie, and he was like, no, he was like, because I prefer to watch this than be in it. And then he says in hindsight, he says, I think it's going to be a bitch to shoot. Now, whether he thought that, I don't know. But the thing was, when he went to watch that movie, The Apprenticeship of Dudley Kravitz, he thought his performance in that was absolutely terrible, that he thought to himself, I better get a job right away before this opens everywhere and I can't get work. So he actually phoned Spielberg and begged for the part, and he turned up on the East Coast. I'm not sure if it was Boston or somewhere like that to meet Spielberg and Carl Gottlieb, who was the screenwriter, and he turned up with the beanie, with the glasses, with the beard, and as soon as he walked in, they went, "Don't change a thing. You're Hooper. That's perfect." So he looks completely different in the movie than he does in the book.
And well, it works. I think it's honestly like one of the classic looks of Richard Dreyfuss throughout his entire career. Because I mean, the guy completely changes. Here, he actually feels like he feels the youngest of the three of them.
Yeah, 100%. And he's like only 26 years of age or something. And
people just aged so fast back then.
Yeah, but like you say, John, I always think I think we touched on this in Steak. He always looked older than what he was, Dreyfuss. But at the same time, when you're younger, like 26 seemed older anyway when you're a kid watching Jaws. But he seems more like a 30, 32, 33-year-old than he does a 26-year-old. But he's perfect in this film. I absolutely love him. People talk about who's your favorite character, probably Quint, but I love Brody and I love Hooper. It's the three of them that make the movie. It's not just one.
Yeah, no, you need all three of them. They all complement each other so well. There are times like I can understand, like when you think about, it's really more of a part two thing when they all start to get together, because these are still like the kind of introductions. We just met Quint, and this is us just meeting Matt Hooper for the first time. But they play off each other so well. I'll save that for later.
Yeah, save that for later on, mate. But of course, we have Hooper kind of helping Brody out here, and there's a couple of classic lines here about where Brody asked him, "You help me get those guys out of that boat," because he was dealing with a guy that has dynamite, and he says, "Gentlemen, the officer asked me to tell you that you're over that boat." And he's like, what do you care? You're not going. And he's like, "Well, can you tell me if there's a nice restaurant or hotel on the island?" And one of them says, "You walk straight ahead."
I know. Oh, they're all going to die.
They're all going to die. Yeah. So then I love this. I think this is very funny as well. When Brody's in the shed and he's on the phone to Paulie and he's saying about, get the roadblock signs out in the highway. We've got too many people down here we can handle. And he turns and he looks out the window and Hendricks is just standing there watching everybody. And Brody tries to get his attention and throws something at the window. It's like chalk or something at the window to get his attention. And he just turns and waves. Brody's like, "Get in here." And he's like, "What are you doing out there?" He says, "These are your people. Go out there and talk to them. We've got too many people down here we can handle." And that's when Dreyfuss opens the door and says, "The guys in the boat out there, they're not going to go to the harbour alive." And he's like, "That's what I'm talking about. Their first names. Go and talk to those clowns." And of course, Dreyfuss says, "Can you tell me how I can find Chief Brody?" And he's like, "Who are you?" He says, "I'm Matt Hooper from the Oceanographic Institute." And he's like, I'm Brody. Nice to meet you." So that's how they're introduced, John. And I feel like this is the start of a really nice bromance here.
Yeah, these two, because like they do become pretty close pretty quick. And like it always feels like, once Quint gets involved, that bromance kind of falls a little bit to the wayside until the very end. But like, yeah, these two guys kind of kick it off right from the beginning. And I like that. It does feel like a good bromance. Like these guys are kind of meant to become friends.
But what's nice about this is, John, as well, as this scene develops, this shark hunting day develops, you soon see that Brody has an ally now. It's not just him. It's just him by himself against the town. He's got somebody that's going to be on his side and fight his corner. But first of all, we see the boats all heading out for the shark hunt here. As I say, we see them, chumming and throwing cherry bombs in. It's chaos. So it is that a lot of them, they don't know what they're doing. And we see Ben Gardner as well, mouthing off. And then we cut to Hooper examining the remains of Chrissy Watkins. And of course, the medical examiner's there. And how do you feel about them? Like, I've heard a lot of people always make a comment about this, and it's always kind of just never dawned on me this. I've never thought about it too much. The fact that they take her remains out in a very small plastic basket. That's all that's left of her.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard I've heard of this in other movies where they kind of like said that there's not really much left of the person, so like this is what they have to do. I mean, unfortunately, that's kind of what happens.
Yeah, and of course, he very quickly establishes that this was no boat accident. Did you notify the Coast Guard about this? And Brody's like, "No, it's only local jurisdiction." Anyway, but you see the medical examiner, he's been found out because you see the guilty look all over his face. And I love that, actually. It's very subtle. At the start of the scene, you see, a lot of people don't notice this. Brody's holding a raft.
Yeah. And
he's holding the lilo at the start of the scene.
Yeah,
so and I throws it down.
I like how you're talking about the medical examiner like looking like that, because it does circle right back to like how he changed and then he flip flopped and he just figured. I just don't know what you're thinking. Like, you don't think like somebody dying like this is not going to catch up to you lying?
Yeah. Well, I love how when Richard Dreyfuss gives that speech of his, where that famous one, well, this is not a boat accident. And you see Brody staring over at the medical examiner, and the medical examiner can't look at him. He's standing with his head down.
Because he
and you see
knew.
Brody giving him the eyes, yeah, and of course he throws the water over his face and he says, "It's a shark." And then we cut to the next scene where we have this massive tiger shark jaw kind of opening up, and there's a big commotion. Everybody's very excited that they've caught this big shark. It's a 13-foot tiger shark, and Brody's
He's so happy.
He's so happy. He's like, did Ben Gardner get this? Because obviously Ben Gardner must have a reputation about the place, for being this really good fisherman. And you see I'm going to call them the three bozos, because that's basically what Hooper calls them, these three bozos. So the three bozos are like, no, we got it. We got it. And he's like, oh, it's swell. And Meadows, right, the newspaper man, he is like busting to get a photograph, because he's part of it too. He's part of the conspiracy. So he is with the Mirror, with the medical examiner, and whoever else. Let's get this in the paper. You can guarantee that will be buried in the grocery section. It'll be front page. It'll be headlines. Killer shark caught. And actually, matter of fact, I have a fake newspaper in my toilet hanging with that killer shark slain with that photograph in it.
That's great.
Yeah, it says Amity Gazette on it, and it's got the news stories about the attacks, and it says like beaches will open for 50th annual regatta, and on the other wall I have a replica of the beach close sign.
That's great.
A wooden one. I must send you photos of it.
That's awesome.
So my bathrooms, they got Jaws bathroom, and I got Jaws living room. So it's like you're stepping into a moment in time from the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So so he's busting to get this photograph to say, yeah, we've caught it. And I love how he tells you then Hooper's like trying to measure the shark's mouth, and you hear him saying, Meadows saying, young fella, can you step out of the picture? And Dreyfuss is like, thank you. And walks out of the picture. He's not allowed in the picture. Doesn't know who he is. Get out of the picture. So, and while this is going on as well, John, you actually see like the orca for the first time. Quint is at the helm of the orca, and he's coming into the dock. And I love how he's like marveling at the shark cup, but he's laughing. You hear him like kind of cackling.
He knows right away, because he's too smart for that, Quint.
Yeah, he knows it's not the right one right away.
He's like, and that's why he didn't go. He could have gone out that day and looking, but he's like, I'm not bothering for $3,000. And then he's like, for what's happened? You think that shark did it? He's too stupid. He knows they're stupid.
Yeah, exactly. He knows that's not the one. So he comes in, he's kind of laughing, cackling. So he is. I love that about Robert Shaw when he comes into that scene. And of course, the Mirror comes down, and Brody's saying, Larry, you won't believe it. But of course, in the meantime, the three bozos are harassing Hooper, because Hooper's obviously said to them, I don't think this is the right shark. And they think they're going to lose out $3,000. And one of them's like, what do you mean it's not the right shark? And he's like, want me to stick your head in there and we'll find out if it's a man-eater? And he's kind of, look, I don't want to get beaten up. It's just, it's just a theory that it may not be the right one. So he kind of, and there's that famous line as well in between that where they were going like, what kind of shark is it? What kind is it? And one of them says, I think it's a Mako. And Hooper says, he's got the pencil in his mouth, and he's like, tiger shark. And that's when their man says, oh, what?
Oh, what?
A what?
Like he's never like a tiger shark. How could that be?
Yeah. Oh, what? So Hooper then pulls Brody aside and says, listen, all types of sharks in the waters, hammerheads, white tips, makos, but the chances that these bozos got the right shark is like 100 to 1. But Brody just is in disbelief. He's like, oh, come on, there's no other sharks like this in this water. So he says, the Mirror then starts eavesdropping, and he says, look, what I want to do is very simple. Digestive system in this animal is very, very slow. Let me cut it open. Whatever it's eaten in the last 24 hours is bound to still be in there. But of course, he says it's the only way to be sure. And Brody says to the Mirror, well, it's the only way to confirm it. And the Mirror's like talking them out of it. And it's more, I think, John, the risk of he doesn't care if the Kintner boy's body spills out all over the dock. He doesn't care. It's more the case of proving that it's the wrong one. That's all he's worried about.
the mayor like the way his attitude is, like he's acting, he's trying to take the high ground, but it's from a false stance. He doesn't really truly believe what he's saying.
Yeah, of course he doesn't. And then, yeah, of course he doesn't care. Okay, so then that's when we see Mrs. Kentner
Yep.
walking up in all in black, and that's her father with her. That's why I'm saying she's a widow, because she would be with her husband. There's nobody else there. It's her and her father. And it was a conscious decision to wear the all black. And of course, we have, to me, this is a great scene. It's a very dramatic scene for Lee Ferraro to do, where she says, Chief Brody, and he's like, yes, and slap across the face, and she gives this harrowing speech. To be honest, John, brings them all down to earth with a bang. While everybody's celebrating about catching this face, they forget that a young boy has been brutally killed. And I think I love how the place just goes quiet, and they listen to what she's got to say, and there's a somber kind of atmosphere then after that. But she tells him that she just found out that a girl also got killed, and that he knew, but she didn't, and he didn't do anything. And of course, Brody's got to feel that guilt for him to become the hero that he becomes, to do what he has to do for the remainder of the movie. He has to feel that guilt.
And he definitely, absolutely feels that guilt right in that moment. And it always bothers me. Obviously, she doesn't know the behind the scenes stuff that's going on between him and the mayor and everything that he's fighting against. Actually, he wanted to close the beaches. Like, he's not somebody, like, he wanted that to be an avoidable incident. But now he's the one who has to be the one that falls on that sword for other people. And actually, he will feel guilty for it. Like, that's the guy who already feels guilty, who's got more guilt put on his shoulders by her. And obviously, for her, she just lost her son, and she's like, you knew? Like, of course she feels betrayed by him, but she doesn't know the whole story.
No, she doesn't. And to be honest with you, fair play to Brody as well, because look, like you said, Brody's perceived
He's
as
an honorable man.
He's perceived as a bit of a card, but we know he's not. We realize he's not, because the fact of the matter is that after she gets taken away, breaks down and gets taken away by her dad, as she's walking off, the mirror turns again. You have to look at this, because again, the mirror, he's so slimy. He's just like, I'm sorry, Martin, she's wrong. Like, shifting blame again. He couldn't have even stepped up himself and said, well, this is my fault. He just was like, no, she's wrong.
It's
right?
never him. Never
exactly. Him. But fair play to Martin. But Martin Brody takes it on the chin. He turns around and he says, no, she's not. Because it is. Martin's like, it is my fault. I should have stood up to you bastards. That's what he's thinking.
But it wouldn't have worked. Like, he's in a position where he's fighting up. Like, regardless, they can just replace him with somebody else if they want to. It's a losing battle any which way. He couldn't have done anything more than he could have done that he did. But he's just such an honorable guy. He feels like in his heart he could have done more because of the guilt he feels. But I've always felt like that it's an unfair amount of guilt on his shoulders right there. You should go to the fucking mayor.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what I love about this movie, John. It's these dramatic moments that make this movie. It's not so much just about the shark. It's about how the shark affects this town and affects these people's lives. And like I said, I could sit here and make stories up about what I think about the characters. Somebody else might have a different idea of what they think about the characters, but that's what I love about it. It's world building. And again, how this scene ends, that John Williams score starting, that kind of somber music he plays there, the sad music, and you see Richard Dreyfuss just watching Brody, and in my mind, you're Richard Dreyfuss. That Brody's now got the ally he needs. Dreyfuss sees what's going on here. Dreyfuss puts two and two together and is smart enough to understand. In other words, Hooper understands what's going on here. This guy's being made a fall guy here, and I think Hooper actually feels sorry for Brody in that scene, because he sees. Right before that, when Hooper's saying, like, we got to cut the shark open, I don't think it's the right one, it's the only way to confirm it. Brody's open to it. Brody's like, well, that's the only way to confirm it. And he sees how the mirror is like dead against it. And then when that happens with Mrs. Kentner, he puts two and two together and says, no, I see what's happening here. This is a good man, and they're not listening to him. They're not letting this man do his job to make sure the place is safe. So we go into the next scene of the movie, which to me is a great juxtaposition to what we've heard Mrs. Kentner say. My boy is dead. There's nothing you can do about it. And this is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. It's Brody, depressed, at the dinner table, and his son is watching. There's Brody's got his son. Brody's son's alive.
This is my favorite piece of music in the movie. I mean, I know it's simple, but I love this scene. This is my second favorite scene. I feel like my favorite scene in the movie is kind of like obvious and it's everyone's, but this is my second favorite scene. I love this scene because it is a big juxtaposition for everything that just happened before. And it's a serious, sweet moment in this movie between a father and son. I love it.
Yeah, so do I. And the music, again, John, as much as I love the score from start to finish, I love this music as well. This playful kind of back and forth between them. The music totally kind of like suits these moments. And I have to say as well, this was my daughter's favorite scene in Jaws. I have a video of her doing this.
Oh, really?
While she was watching the movie. Yeah, she just decided to do it. And she just copied them doing the exact same scene. So I absolutely love this. And the track on the soundtrack is called Father and Son. And it brings a wee bit of levity to the weight which Brody is carrying on his shoulders at this stage of the movie. I love how Alan Brody comes in and she's just watching them. And at the end, he just leans in and he says, "Give us a kiss." And the child's like, "Why?" And he's like, "Because I need it." And puts him on the she gives him a bit of purpose to understand, even though he feels that guilt, he has a duty to his family and to the town still. And then you hear the rap at the door. And it's Matt Hooper, your door's open. You mind if I come in? And it's kind of like, are you just barging into everybody's house, do you, Matt?
I know what, because you brought wine, you're just automatically welcomed in. I get it what you're trying to do, but Jesus, knock at the door.
I know, and I love how Alan pretends she didn't see the wine. She's like, can I help you? And he's like, Matt Hooper, and she's like, oh, can I get? I want to speak to your husband, and she says, I would like to speak to him too. In other words, he's not talking to her, and she's like, well, can I get you anything to drink? Can I get you a coffee or anything? He's like, no. And here going, oh, wine, how nice. As if she'd never seen it in his hands. She knew fine right there.
One thing I noticed through the movie is like the two of them are definitely alcoholics, but it's just the 70s, I guess, and everyone was. But like the fact that they wanted to get drunk the night before and fool around, and then like the wine and like her eyes like light it up, like, ooh, wine.
I know. But isn't it such a great movie? We're not so PC that throughout the whole movie somebody's drinking, and isn't it great?
I mean, like I just feel like alcoholism of the time. There was just a lot of functioning alcoholics. I just got done watching a 6-part documentary on Paul Newman, and the guy was like the biggest functioning alcoholic you'd have imagined. Like people didn't even realize that he was like a drunk. Just because he just did his job no matter what. He just went to work every day. He just happened to be drinking the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. I feel it's just so much different. And same with smoking in movies as well. Although I don't endorse smoking, but there's a realism to that. Watching Brody smoking a cigarette and things like that. You see it in Jaws 2 as well. You see it in movies like Ghostbusters and Aliens. You know what I mean? But you don't get that anymore. That kind of realism.
No, because we can't let like kids find out about it. But I don't know. I mean, like I've always just felt like if you want to drink and smoke or whatever, I mean, no one should stop you. You just know what's going to happen. You know the repercussions, but you're an adult. Do what you want.
I agree with you. Listen, I don't smoke. I've watched Jaws since I was 6. Watching Martin Brody smoke a cigarette never made me want to do it. So I just think if it's in you, it's in you. You're not going to do it because somebody else is doing it. I understand back in the day in the 60s stuff, they were pushing advertising like smoking cigarettes and alcohol, and they've done away with a lot of that over here. You can't advertise it.
No, you can't advertise for it here anymore either. Actually, in fact, I'm a big NASCAR fan. I'm wearing a NASCAR hat right now. It used to be called the NASCAR Winston Cup Series, and then Winston wasn't allowed to sponsor anything anymore because he can't promote cigarettes.
Yeah, well, we had it over here where like the snooker was like Embassy Snooker used to sponsor the snooker, and that was Embassy with cigarettes. And then and the football as well, they used to have like lager kind of like companies sponsoring the shirts. They're not allowed to do that anymore either, So as I say, I understand with banning like pushing it that way, but I just think for realism in movies, I think it's going a step far to turn around and try and kind of like
pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah, to pretend it doesn't exist. If it's for your character, I think if an actor wants to do it, they should do it. But
in real life, people drink and smoke. I'm sorry, like I hate to let people know, but like that just happens. There's real alcoholics out there who you might not realize are functioning alcoholics. It's just it's life, man. Everyone lives life different. Like you can't pretend it doesn't exist. I hate that.
And everybody's not the same. You can't pretend that everybody is the same, because things become bland then. So as I say, he turns up with his 2 bottles of wine, one red, one white. Alan points out, and I love how Hooper sits down and he's like, "How was your day?" When he's like swelling to start laughing, that kind of lightens the mood because it's not just the fact that he gets slapped or a boy was killed or a girl was killed. It's just he had a nightmare of a day. He's just like, "How was your day?" And it topped it off with a slap in the face. And again, Hooper's like steals his dinner. Love how he said, "Anybody eating this?" He steals it. He starts eating his dinner, and to break the ice, Alan says that my husband tells you in sharks, and I always love Roy Shader's reaction to this. Watch his reaction. See when she says, "My husband tells me you're in sharks." He pulls like a face at her as if, "Why are you telling them that for? You've just told him I was talking about him, right?"
Yeah.
And Hooper then gives this exposition, a wee bit of exposition about his background, about why he's in the sharks. And at the end of it, he says about, that's why I'm going to go to the institute tomorrow and tell them that you still have a shark problem here. And because she hasn't spoken to Brody, or Brody won't talk to her, he's like, "I thought the shark was caught." She also says to Brody, "You told me they caught the shark. I heard it on the radio." And that's when Hooper says they caught a shark, not the shark. And he's like, "Not the shark that killed the little boy, and probably not the shark that killed the girl." And that's when Brody then cracks open a bottle of red wine and pours himself. Is this the first time, John, we have seen Johnny Depp's mega pint of wine?
Yeah, my God, that's the amount of wine he pours into that glass. It's like, I mean, I think that's a normal amount to pour into a glass, but that's a big glass of wine.
Yeah. Just the wrong type of glass. I have a massive glass, which I put my wine into. It's a gin glass, right? But I wouldn't pour it in a pint glass.
Yeah, I mean, there's just, well, I get it, but I also, that's something that kind of feels realistic to me. I don't know how many people, like, for me, like, I would probably do something like that. My wife would get mad at me for doing something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how he kind of pours it and then stops and then looks and then pours a wee bit more.
Like, yeah, because it's been that kind of day. It's like, normally I drink this, but you know what? Fuck it.
Yeah, fuck this shit. And then he pours. I love how he's pouring Richard Dreyfuss's or Hooper's, and he takes about that much. He's like, puts his 2 fingers on it. "No, that's enough for me."
Yeah.
He's all like, "Do you want to let that breathe?" And he's like, Nothing.
Nothing.
Because he's just like, "Nah, pouring it, fuck it." And yeah, so then that's when he says about he says that, "Brody, you're going to be the only rational man left on this island." So he knows you're going to be the only rational man left on this island when I leave tomorrow. And she says, "Where are you going?" He says, "The Aurora. It's a floating asylum for shark fanatics, 18 months at sea." And that's when she gives exposition about Brody. He's afraid of boats. He's afraid of the water. And she's like, "There's a clinical name for it." And he's like, "Drowning." And then he starts talking to Hooper about sharks, but he's learned about sharks. And he talked about shark attacks and the rogue shark theory, which Hooper buys into, which is trying to explain what this shark is doing. And a lot of scientists don't believe in this theory. They don't believe this happens. But in this movie, it's basically where a shark comes into an area and he keeps feeding until the food supply is gone. Okay. Hooper says it's territoriality. And that's when Hooper says, or Brody says, "Well, we'll have one more drink and we'll go down and cut the tiger shark open." And Alan said, "Martin, can you do that?" And he's like, "I can do anything. I'm the chief of police."
Yep. And I love this next scene actually of like them cutting open the tiger shark, because I mean it's the little sound effects of when Matt's in the shark that I like. It sounds like that rubber thing, like when he's cutting it open and like getting grossed out by it and then keeping it on that angle of him like stepping away. Love those things.
Yeah. I love how he's like, and that's not actually the tiger shark. He's the real tiger shark. He's cutting open. That's actually it's a fake shark which was made for that particular scene. That's why you only see like the fin and stuff.
I figured that because I think I heard that the shark that they showed on the scene before, they actually had brought down there on ice and it stunk.
Yeah, it did. It stunk the place up. Yeah, so it was they took a few days to film that scene, and with the heat beating down, and it just stank, and they had to put makeup on it to keep it fresh, to make it look fresh and all this. So by the time they came to shoot that scene, they made a mock-up shark. But again, it's good acting. I'm not laughing at it, but I love how like Hooper's kind of like, "You start in the alimentary canal and you open the digestive tract."
Well, you can hear him cutting, and it sounds like I don't know what cutting a shark sounds like. It almost sounds like he's just cutting rubber, and like that's what they actually recorded. But I like to think that's what it sounds like.
It's very tough. The very tough skin, the very thick skin. It is very tough to cut through there. I've seen shark autopsies done on film, not in real life, on documentaries, and it can be very tough because their skin's so thick. So as I say, all this fluid comes out of the shark's belly, and he pulls out a couple of fish, he pulls out a couple of tin cans, and he's like, "Just like I thought. Come up from the Gulf Stream, from southern waters." And Brody's got like the what do you call the torch, and he's like looking, and he's like throws it down, and it's a number plate, and it's Spielberg's reference to James Bond, Live and Let Die, Louisiana, 007, Sportsman's Paradise.
Yep.
And he says he didn't need a car, did he? And he's like, no, Tiger Shark's like a garbage can. Somebody probably threw it in the river. So Hooper then says to him, that's it. Now that's in there. And Brody's, well, we got to close the beach and let's call the mirror. And he's like, but you've got a bigger problem than that. You've got a hell of a fish out there with a mouth about this big. And Brody's like, well, how do we confirm that by morning? And he's like, well, we'll go and take a look right now. He's a night feeder. And Brody's like, I'm not drunk enough to go out in a boat. And he's like, yes, you are.
Yes, you are. Like basically, like I know you're afraid of this, but we'll get you out there. Come on.
Yeah. He's like, I'm not drunk enough to go out in a boat. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. You can't do that. Yes, you can. So it cuts to the next scene, and I love this. How they're right. It's a bit illogical. It's a bit irrational going out at night time to look for it. Like, I mean, what are they going to do? But listen, it's great for the movie because we build up
their relationship is what this scene is for, and really, is to build up their relationship and to give you one good scare at the end of it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, mate, yes, it builds up to one of the greatest, if not the greatest jump scare of all time.
Still got me the other day. Like I guess because I kind of let my guard down a little bit, even though I know it was coming. Still made me jump.
Yeah, no, it's so good, and it still works to this day. People who don't know what's coming. I remember as a child that scene. I must don't know what age I was, mate. I was very young, and when that happened, I actually bounced back. That the sofa moved back with me. So it did. I jumped back that far, but as you say, their relationship on the boat, which starts off with Brody's now blocked, he's drunk, and he's talking about New York, and it's basically telling you the reason why I left New York. You know what I mean? About the crime and kids can't leave the house. You got to walk them to school. And he's like, but in Amity, one man can make a difference. He's like, there hasn't been a shooting or a murder in this town for 25 years. And I love how he's always eating. Richard Jefferson's always eating. He's like, you want a pretzel? And he's like, where are we? And he's like, we're in the stretch where he's been feeding. And he's marveling about his equipment. He's like, who pays for this stuff? The Institute? And he's like, well, he says, I pay for it mostly myself. And he's like, you're kidding. And he's like, you're rich. He's like, well, me personally or the whole family. So now you're getting the background of Hooper. He's a real rich kid. He comes from big money. And he says, it doesn't make much sense. And I love this line as well, where he says back to him, well, it doesn't make much sense. He says, it doesn't make much sense. They pay a guy like you to watch sharks. You know, a guy obviously who's from money. And then he says, well, it doesn't make much sense for a guy who's the water to live on an island either. And he's like, that makes a lot of sense. Yep. You know, and then this fish finder goes off and Hooper puts it down to it's a school of mackerel. But you realize that is the shark passing underneath him.
Yep. It's so big you would think it's a school of fish. Again, selling you the size of the shark.
Yeah. Well, not only that, he says school of mackerel. Now, the great white shark is from the mackerel family.
Okay, see, I don't know that.
Yeah, the mackerel family of sharks. So that's why he's like, oh, it's a school of mackerel. It's like, no, it's like Jaws is passing underneath you. And it's that big, they just don't realize it. And they never realize it. And I love that about this movie as well. It just leaves things kind of like hanging. You don't have to explain that. And that's when they come across, he's like, there's something else out there. And they come across Ben Gardner's boat. And it's all smashed up and damaged. And that great John Williams score starts, that wondrous score. And as they get closer, Brody's like, what happened? And you can see that the boat is damaged and stuff. Yeah, so it's all smashed up. Oh, that's what I was going to say as well. This is what I talk about, John, when I talk about Spielberg back in those days using light and shadow. This is the scene he really uses it in when you find Ben Gardner's boat.
Yeah, no, I love this. I also love the way, honestly, the yellow lighting off of their boat in here is something I always enjoyed. I enjoy the look of this actual scene of the boat floating in the middle of the water, like it's just them, and then they find this deserted boat. Like this is like one of the scariest scenes just in general before they go under the water.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Actually, this scene is in the book, but in the book it's during the day, and they have Meadows with them, and they just lean over the side and pull a tooth out of the boat, and I think they have the tooth. Not sure if Ben Gardner's there. I think Ben Gardner's just totally disappeared.
Well, they say in the next scene about like the tooth and he dropped it out of fear, right?
Yeah. So what actually happened was they tried to film that scene as it was in the book. And what actually happened was Meadows was with them. Carl Gottlieb was with them. And when they tried to film it, he fell overboard by accident. And the shot, they couldn't refilm it that day. So they decided that it was a bit difficult to film it at sea. That what they would do, because we're already behind the schedule, what they would do is they would film it on the backlot at Universal Studios. And then as time went on, they realized, like, well, we don't need Meadows with us. And also we'll do it at night. So that will make it more scarier.
I think that works much, much better for the scene.
Yeah,
They feel
100%.
alone at sea.
Yeah, exactly. And then people will say this is crazy for Hooper, but I think it also shows Hooper is a brave guy, even though he's a scientist. He's a bit of a geek. He's from money. He's rich. He's still got a set of balls because he's like, I'm gonna go down there and check their hull. And then Brody's like, just tow it in. And he's like, don't worry, nothing's gonna happen.
Yeah, I feel like this is a big trait in the movie that they kind of don't say. Is like, yeah, they've just established that he's a rich guy, but this is what he truly loves to do. It's like, look
Yeah.
at what he spent his money on. He doesn't have to do this because he's rich, but this is what he enjoys doing. And obviously, like, he's probably built up this blind courage over time because he doesn't have as many worries about maybe on the financial end of things, and he just kind of maybe he's naive enough. Like, and we also don't know anything about like his personal life as far as a relationship. He just kind of came into town on his own. Maybe he's a single guy, no kids, and he can have that courage. He can afford to have that courage.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think as well, and you touched on it because we talked about this last night after the show we done last night. We talked about how kind of like Jaws the shark is doing things that isn't expected from sharks, and
Yeah.
he's doing things that they haven't seen before. So Dreyfus is getting in there, as you say. He's a bit of a renegade, and he's kind of like thinking to himself, he's not expecting a shark of 25 feet. Maybe he's expecting something around the size of 16 feet. It's a big one. It could attack me, but look, I've done this before. I've get in, my boat's there, the lights are on. I'll be fine. I'll see it coming if I do. He's probably thinking more like that. Scientists have done it before, getting with sharks and things like that. So you're right. In the novel, that's not forget that the character's loosely based on a character in the novel, and the guy in the novel is very full of himself, egotistical, and I think he's a single guy in that as well. He's a young guy, he's single as well, and he comes from a rich family as well, the guy in the book. So yeah, I love this. He gets into the water, the music is amazing, he swims up towards the hull, and the reason why he doesn't want to tow it in is for the exact reason why he finds the tooth, because it's like a detective at a crime scene. Once you start messing with a crime scene, you start to lose things. So he doesn't want to lose any maybe evidence that might be on the boat, because the boat is worse for wear. And right enough, he swims up and he clips out a massive great white shark tooth. And that's when he sees that, it's when he starts looking around himself. He's like, right, I think I better get out of here. But he kind of moves about in the hole of the boat. And of course, what happens is Ben Gardner's big head comes out through the hole in the boat, and to me, it's up there possibly as number 1 and number 2 best jump scare of all time.
Oh, it's perfect. It scares the hell out of you. It looks scary as hell. Yeah, of course. And yeah, the score kick, the sting in the score to let you know, like, yeah, it's supposed to scare you. And of course, it scares the hell out of Hooper, who then just comes flying right back up top.
Yeah, he blows his air, comes straight up, and I love how Brody's looking at the monitors to see what he runs over with the torch in. But I love when Hooper gets to like the ladder, he's just going. So
great.
he is, yeah. And then obviously, that all I'll say is, how do you think Ben Gardner died in there?
Yeah, I'm wondering how the hell that actually happened. I'm guessing that he was reaching over, the shark grabbed him, and then that's what happened. That's how he ended up down there.
Yeah, I'm thinking that he had a mate with him. People forget about the mate. He would do it with a mate. So I think what actually happened was that the shark attacked the boat. It knocked Ben Gardner overboard. It bit his legs off. His mate pulled him back up onto the boat. Then the shark jumped out of the water and grabbed his mate, pulled his mate over and ate his mate, swam off, and Ben Gardner bled out in the boat with no legs.
Ah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. I think that's a great theory.
Yeah. I say jump out of the water and grabs his mate. I don't want it to sound like Jaws of Revenge, but I do think that...
Yeah, I don't think it was doing a big jump over the boat or anything. I think kind of like how we see later in the movie, he kind of like rests his chin on there.
Yeah, I think maybe it knocked into the boat because there was a hole in the boat. Maybe it knocked in the boat, knocked both of them over, and then killed his mate. And then was Ben Gardner was pulling himself up, and maybe bit his legs off, and he pulled himself into the boat, and he bled to death in the boat. And then that's how his body ended up there. I mean, it's it's not just his head, it's his body. And then of course, because we've got the next scene now, right, where Brody and Hooper are trying to convince the mayor to close the beaches, right, and basically they're saying like he's like, I pulled the tooth the size of a shot glass out of a wrecked hull of a boat out there, and it was the tooth of a great white. And Brody was like, it was Ben Gardner's boat, it was all chewed up. You should have seen him. Right? So even he said you should have seen him. So there was damage to Ben Gardner's body. But of course the mayor's kind of like, you don't have the tooth, and he's like, no, I dropped it. He's like, he had an accident on the way in, and he's like, And so that Ray doesn't have the evidence. So right
Yeah.
away, he's kind of like, we depend on the people here for our very lives. If we close the beaches, we're finished. Hooper, I think, has some great lines here, John, where he's kind of like, well, I think I'm familiar with the fact that if you don't deal with this problem, it's going to swim up and bite you in the ass. And then right away, like the mayor's just totally dismissing the whole situation. He tries to change the conversation about silly stuff like the saying. I love how it pans over. And I keep in
Oh
mind,
my God, yeah.
this whole scene is done in one shot. Do you realize that? There's another scene that's just done in one shot.
Yeah, it's I love this. Yeah, the camera kind of just pans up because you might not have even noticed the graffiti until he points it out. And then you're like, oh, yeah. Like,
Yeah,
but of
and
course,
it's
that's
done
what he's thinking about.
Yeah, and it's kind of done from a low angle, and it kind of pans around, and he's trying to just change the subject. He's like, sick vandalism. This is a deliberate mutilation of a public service message. And they can't believe it. Brody and Hooper they just can't believe it. They're like, seriously, this guy, you know? And that's when Hooper's like, that's it. I'm not wasting my time. I'm going. But Brody begs him to come back. And of course, Hooper, one last chance to try and convince the mayor. And another great line when he says, Hooper says to him, all this machine does is swim and eat and make little sharks. That's all. Why don't you take a long, close look at this sign? Those proportions are correct. And he says, love to prove that, wouldn't you? Get your name into the National Geographic. And Hooper just starts laughing. And then Brody says to him, look, if we do something today, we might be able to save August. And the mayor's like, August? Why? For Christ's sake, tomorrow's the 4th of July, and we will be open for business. So when he says to them, you fellas do whatever you have to make the beaches safe, but they're going to be opened. And I love, do you ever notice when he gets in his car, John, there's like a sign that says one way. It's like, yeah, he's going one way. He's not changing his mind.
No, he can't. And like, he feels the pressure too himself, but he's the one that's going to drive this into the ground.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, then we have this montage of all the tourists coming to Amity. And we have Hooper and Brody scurrying about, trying to arrange the safety for the beach. And another great piece of music by John Williams.
Yes, perfect piece of music.
And then we we also hear, by the way, Hooper on the phone saying about, there's no point in me to go to Brisbane when I have a great white shark right here. So he must have cancelled his trip on the Aurora, and obviously, going somewhere else. He's like, I've got a great white here. Why do I have to go? So he's arranging, he's going to stay there until this problem's sorted. And then we cut to the 4th of July beach scene, which is the biggest beach scene of the whole movie. And we open up with the Shark Attack arcade game, which is very reminiscent to the end of the movie.
Yes, it is, which is, I guess, foreshadowing when you watch the movie back.
Yeah, it foreshadows it. And we have, I love how he's all the boats, there's all these boats off the shore, and there's like a helicopter flying about, and nobody's getting into the water. And I love how Brodo, and they've all got walkie-talkies and guns. And I love how Brodo radios in to Matt Hooper and says, come in, Hooper, what do you see? And he's like, nothing here, Martin, and nothing on sonar. He's the only one that's got sonar and nothing on sonar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we see that the news reporter, which you know who that news reporter is?
No.
So the news reporter who comes out and says, talks about that, a cloud in the shape of a killer shark. That's Peter Bansley, who wrote the novel Jaws.
Oh, that's him?
Yeah.
I guess I could see that with the glasses. He's just very young there.
Yeah, he was like in his 30s, like mid-30s, maybe late 30s.
I'm guessing, just in my head, I always just imagine him doing the interviews for like the documentaries, thinking that's what he just looks like all the time. But yeah, he's a young man once.
Yeah, he's young. So that was Peter Bansley, and it was David Brown, the producer, talked him into having a cameo. He was like, it makes the film more legitimate if the writer is in the movie. So he talked him in, and I think he used to work for a newsroom, I think, or whatever. I know I used to work for the president. Actually, he used to work for. He was a speechwriter for LBJ.
Oh, well, that makes sense. In the 60s, Lyndon B. Johnson. Okay,
that
adds up.
He worked in the White House. So he does that. We has that wee cameo, and of course the mayor then sees what they've done. There's nobody getting in the water, and I love how he's raging, and he's just like, bastards.
Yeah. Yeah. What did he expect to have happen? At least they're at the beach. Like, why you have to force them in the water?
Well, Brody. Well, at the end of the day, he tried to be cute. He was like, the beaches be open. You make sure you make it safe. So Brody's like, oh, really? You want me to make it safe? I'll make sure it's safe. Yeah, I'll have men lined up like it's a demilitarized area with M1 Garans and walkie-talkies and boats laying in the beach and a helicopter flying overhead. And it's just reminding everybody, don't go in there. that it still isn't safe.
Yeah, and I can you blame them? I wouldn't want to go. I wouldn't have even gone to the beach that day. But you know what? This is kind of like their one of their only forms of entertainment. People look forward to the 4th of July, and they're gonna still go out there and hang out.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the beginning of like their summer season. So this is a big deal to them. We have to have a great 4th of July, and then we kick on from there. We go into the rest of July and August. August tomorrow's the 4th of July. I always put that in my Facebook. See the 3rd of July. I put that up.
Really?
A picture of the mirror saying, "For Christ's sake, tomorrow's the 4th of July."
I have to pay attention to your Facebook this year around the 4th of July.
Yeah, it always comes up in my memories, and then I have to share it again. I have to put it on again. So, yeah, just it's him in his car, and his speech bubble. Who's saying, "For Christ's sake, tomorrow's the 4th of July." Yeah, so he then goes over and he leans on one. I think it's one of the selectmen. "Why aren't you in the water?" And he's like, "Well, I just put some suntan lotion on, and nobody's going in. Please get in the water." So you see him looking at his wife, and it's like, we're going to have to. He's the boss. You know what I mean? So once they go in with their 2 young kids too on another inflatable raft, may I add, everybody thinks, oh, well, it must be safe. Everybody starts running in, and everybody's having a wonderful time. And the mayor's got a big smile on his face. And Brody sees Mike heading towards the water with his brand new boat. And he comes over, "Mike, come here. Why don't you take your boat and put it in the pond?" And he's like, "The pond's for old ladies." And he's like, "Just do it for the old man." And he's like, "Okay." So he goes off into the pond. And you see, this is weird for me because I suppose it's just the kind of like fill loopholes, because you see Ellen and she's like, "I've got Sean." And he's like, and Brody's waving. But you see Sean running after Mike. So obviously he's got loose of his mum and he's chasing Michael towards the pond saying, "Michael, I don't want you to go in the water." But in the meantime, we see Hendrix. And I don't know if you noticed this, John. Hendrix is like, Daisy, thought I saw a shadow over." And it's like, "No, we don't see anything." He's like, "Must be this glare." But see in the background, you can see the tip of the fin.
Oh, yeah, I definitely didn't notice that ever. But
Well,
now I will.
Yeah, but it's obviously the fake. I would say it's the fake fin, John.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's the fake fin. And it's got all these underwater shots of like people's legs hanging down. But the thing is, what you notice what is off is that there's no music.
So to show you that's not the real shark.
Yep, it's a red herring. And then we cut to the mayor being interviewed, telling us bullshit about we caught and killed a large predator that supposedly injured some bathers. But as you can see, it's a beautiful day. The beaches are open and everybody's having a wonderful time.
And everyone's enjoying themselves here today.
Yeah. Amity, as you know, means friendship. But he's like supposedly injured some bathers. There's been fucking 3 people killed.
Yeah, I know. Like, come on. Maybe. Like, how does this not leak out? But I guess the news like trickles out back then.
Well, they put it at the back along with the grocery ads. So
yeah, I know. It's like some of the only people that are going to realize that are just looking for the grocery sales. Oh my God. You guys see this? There was a shark attack and someone's dead.
Yeah. But you've got to remember too as well, the official line is we've caught it.
That's true. That is true. The tiger shark has been caught.
Yeah, and who is really going to report about Chrissy or Ben Gardner? As far as they're aware, Ben Gardner just died in a boat accident. You know what I mean? It's only it's only Kentner they're attributing to the death. I mean, probably officially, only because they've seen it on the beach. But of course, we then cut and we see the fin going through the water, and the cops in the boats, they see it, blow the whistles. Brody's running down, shouting, no whistles, because he doesn't want to attract the shark. And of course, there's pandemonium ensues. And I just love how everybody's scrambling out of the water and they run past the mirror, and the mirror's like kind of like flabbergasted that everybody's running out of the water. But of course, some people are hurt in a stampede. There's some injured as well. They're pulled up onto the beach, and then we cut to the actual fin, and it overturns, and 2 kids pop up under the water with snorkels, and one of them's like, "He made me do it. He talked me into it." Yeah.
Right there, huh?
Do you think these are the same kids that done the Amity sign, that vandalized the Amity sign?
I think so. I mean, like, it's just too I mean, I feel like they're trying to hint at that because they're wearing black, black, what do they call those swimsuits, I guess? I don't know. Whatever they're supposed to be wearing.
They're just wetsuits.
Wetsuits, that's the word. Yeah, so they're all black. The fins are black. It was a black fin on the sign. I think they're trying to hint that these 2 kids are just kind of being little menaces.
Yep, and they If you look, I think near certain the fin on the billboard almost looks like the fin that they made, kind of. You know,
Yeah.
one thing about that billboard, by the way, that billboard encompasses the events of the first hour of the movie. You've got the blonde-haired girl, you've got the raft, the inflatable raft, you've got the black fin, like what they have, and you've also in the background got a couple of boats, kind of that don't look like Ben Gardner's boat, but you know, it encompasses everything that happens in that first hour, which I think is genius. But of course, Hooper informs Brody. He says there are 2 kids with a cardboard fin. Did everybody there okay? Everybody get out of the water all right? And that's then when we cut to a painter. She's an artist. She's painting the scenery of the estuary, and she sees this fin slowly making its way into the estuary. And I love this. This just gives me chills because it's like while they're all scrambling down one side of the beach with a fake fin, and it's obviously fake, when you see the fake shark, it looks real.
Yeah. This one like comes along really and like she's like shark, like you know, like she can't get it loud enough. Shark.
She's like, it's going in the pond, shark in the estuary. But it's kind of like Brody's had his fill by stage. It's like the boy that cried wolf. He's like, what now? And then it's Alan that goes to Michael's in the pond, and he's like, oh shit, what if it is the shark? So I love as well how you can hear over the tannoy in the background, you can hear somebody going, we seem to have some practical jokers out there with a fake fin. It's just a trick, but that was a fake fin. You know, trying to tell everybody everything's all right, go back in the water. It was just a joke. In the meantime, the real threat is coming in. And you see the shark pass, Sean. You can see part of the tail fin, tip of the dorsal fin. You can see how big it is. And it starts heading towards the guy in the wee red boat. The estuary victim is a guy called Ted Grossman, who is a stuntman. And Brody's running towards the pond. I love this music by John Williams. And it knocks his wee boat over. And this is the first time. Well, it knocks his wee boat over. And I don't know whether or not the shark knocks Michael's boat over, or it's just kind of like the water from the, you know what I mean? Being
like
over.
The wave it created. The
wave, exactly, knocking them over because they were trying to tie something and didn't have their sails or nothing up. And they fall in the water too. And this is the first time you really see. The people think the first time you see the shark is when Brody's chumming. But this is like the first time you really see the shark, you really see its head, and you see the size of it. And I love that. I love how it's kind of like the Kintner attack, where you see something, it cuts, and then it comes back, and you see the real, the real horror of it. And it's kind of like you see it it's kind of scary. It's kind of like under the water. You can kind of hardly make it out, and he just gets pulled under, and then it cuts to the girls on the beach sunbathing, and they can hear screaming, and they get up and look to see what's going on. And I love that's when you cuts back so quickly, shark's head out of the water, it clamps down, he's squealing, and then it cuts, and that's when you see that leg just drop. And I think the leg looks so realistic.
It does look realistic, and that's what I meant. I'm like, that's when I was like, I can't believe this is PG, because that looks like a real leg and the blood coming off of it. Perfect shot.
And the way it just hits the seabed and kind of like falls over, and the blood just kind of coming off it, it
slowly looks in the water. Yeah.
So good. And that's the clip which Spielberg had to trim to make it a PG. Apparently that lingered on the leg longer than that. It must have lingered on it. Must have watched it settle, but you see it just as soon as it hits, it cuts. And I love that high shot there. You can see the boys in the background trying to climb out and get onto the boat again. But his overturned red boat, you just see the blood bubbling up to the surface. I think that looks so realistic. It looks class. Everybody's on the beach. They're screaming. They're pointing. And the shark then, everybody's shouting to get out of the water. But because Meg Brody's just frozen in terror, the shark just swims right past them. And Brody runs across the bridge and jumps over the side. And just before he jumps over the side, you see the fin coming out. Look how big it is when it's passing everybody.
Yeah, because we still have not seen the real shark yet. Now it's still just a mystery in our minds. Like, how big is this? And we're getting glimpses of how big it is at this point.
And I love how you can hear people in the background, what they're saying. You can hear, I think you hear somebody saying about, look how big it is or something. And you hear somebody shouting, has anybody got a gun? Got a gun? You can shoot it. But of course, Brody makes it to the edge of the water. And his friend and Meg Brody's friends are helping pull him out of the water. And I love how it lingers on his legs to show that his legs are still attached. He's still got his legs. Yeah. And they pull him up onto the beach. And Alan comes down and she's like, is he dead? And Brody's like, no, he's not. He's in shock.
Just shocked.
Shocked, yeah. And you see Sean crying. And I love this while Alan Brody's crying over Michael Brody, who's passed out, how Brody kind of sits up on his honkers. John Williams, amazing music, the way he looks out onto the sea, and it just zooms in onto the sea. It's just kind of like Brody now has to go out and face the shark on the shark's terms. That's
Face
what it
his
feels
fear
like.
too.
Face his fear, and he has to deal with this problem head on in its own backyard.
Yep. And that's exactly where they're going to start the second half of this movie.
Yeah. This is where we're going to end it here. And then once we, part 2, we will pick up where we left off.
Yeah, so if you guys want to follow along with us, make sure you guys follow along and know exactly where we're going to be picking up for part 2, which will be actually next Friday. So you'll get us 3 Fridays in a row, which is rare for the show, because you'll have this part 2 and then whatever we do after Jaws. But we hope you guys enjoyed part 1 and enjoyed us breaking this down, because I had fun breaking this down with you so far.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. I hope I didn't go on too much, but I hope anybody who enjoyed this can hear how passionate I am about this movie.
Well, we want this to be the full, the other than the 2 documentaries that have been made about it, we want this to be the full breakdown of Jaws that people come to, because they have the biggest Jaws fan in the world here.
I was going to say, where is he?
He's right behind you. That guy with the full head of hair behind you.
a dog over there. Yeah,
a lot of hair.
Yeah, no, listen, I hope people enjoyed our first part of Jaws. I don't think the second part probably won't run as long as this. I don't think I intended it to go this long, but once we started dissecting and breaking down the scenes, I found it fun. So I hope, John, I didn't bore you too much. I hope you enjoyed it.
No, I had an absolute blast. This was about what I expected. I'm glad we scheduled 2 parts for this, because imagine we just wanted to do this in one part.
Yeah, well, my whole idea was to kind of like break it up in 2 parts, as I said, and do the land stuff in one episode and the water stuff in the second episode. And we said, yeah, it'd be great for the 50th. But you did say to me last night, well, we'll just do the whole thing tomorrow night. And I was like, no, we'll just do the land part. But I expected it to be about 2 hours. But listen, we did have a great conversation for nearly an hour before we started breaking down the first hour of the movie. So that probably accredits for how long this episode is run on.
Yeah, but I hope you guys really enjoyed it, because I had a blast, and I'm looking forward to doing part 2 for you guys next week. And that's going to do it here for us on this episode. So we'll be seeing you around.